Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of the Buchanan family. Molly met Adam Buchanan, a divorced father of one, when she applied for an office manager position at his company. At the time, Adam was raising his son Nolan from a previous marriage on his own. Molly, a cheerful and sociable blonde, immediately caught the attention of the company owner, and the interest was mutual. They started a romance, which turned into a serious relationship, and Molly eventually moved in with Adam. Molly, who dreamed of a loving and friendly family, made an effort to build a strong bond with her stepson Nolan. Soon, she became pregnant, and they had a son named Gavin. Those who knew the Buchanans described them as a close-knit family of four. Adam, who owned a construction company, earned a comfortable living, and the family even purchased a vacation property in El Dorado County, California, a small cabin on 19 acres in Greenwood. The cabin was rustic with no electricity, water, sewer, or gas. But Adam, being in the construction business, actively worked on remodeling it, and the family frequently visited the cabin. On September 13, 2015, at 10 a.m., the Garden Valley Fire Department responded to a wildfire in Greenwood Township, western El Dorado County, on Highway 193 between Coloma and Georgetown. Upon arrival, they found that the fire had destroyed 10 acres of the property, and the cabin had burned to the ground, with charred remains in the ashes. The fire department personnel left the scene untouched. At 11 a.m., firefighters alerted the El Dorado County Sheriff's Office to the fire scene, unsure of what they were dealing with. Initially, they suspected a pet might be trapped inside the house. However, upon arriving, the coroner faced a challenging situation. The house was still smoldering, making it impossible to inspect the interior. They had to wait for the flames to die down and the temperature to decrease. Once the coroner could examine the house, they detected the pungent smell of burnt flesh and soon discovered a human skull and charred torso. It became apparent that the tragedy had claimed a life. The officer called for backup, and additional officers from the sheriff's office arrived to conduct a meticulous investigation of the scene. The evidence led to an obvious conclusion: the isolated cabin, located in a remote area, was not the primary residence of its owners, but rather a vacation retreat. A Dodge truck and trailer were found on the adjacent property, and running the license plates could identify the owner. It was possible that the owner was the wildfire victim. It was quickly discovered that the vehicle and trailer belonged to Buchanan Construction, a company owned by Adam Buchanan. Buchanan, the owner, lived 160 miles away from the accident scene, a 3-hour drive from Bonita, California. This information supported the police's initial assumption that the house served as a country retreat for city dwellers who vacationed there to escape the hustle and bustle. It remained unclear who was inside, the company's owner, Mr. Buchanan, or someone else. The detectives began their investigation with the owner's name as their first clue. The Bonita police officer's task was to verify that all of Buchanan's family members were safe and at home. At the correct address, the officers arrived at the Buchanan's driveway, where they noticed a white Ford pickup truck. When they knocked on the door, Adam's 16-year-old son from his first marriage answered, looking surprised, and asked what had brought them to his doorstep. To avoid alarming the household, the officers decided to first establish who was present in the house. They didn't want to assume that the company car's disappearance was necessarily linked to the owner himself. It could have been taken by someone else from the company. Nolan Buchanan informed the officers that his father, Adam, had left for the weekend to his country estate, 160 miles away, with his partner Molly and their 8-year-old son Gavin, and they were expected to return in the evening. According to Nolan, his father had entrusted him with taking care of the house. Although the remains found in the cabin were not yet confirmed to be those of the Buchanans, the information gathered and the discovery of 2 sets of remains by the evening of September 13th were enough to declare the family missing. The El Dorado County Police visited Nolan's home on September 14th to question him further and determine who had perished in the fire. However, they were met by Adam's parents, Howard and Susan Buchanan, who explained that their son, the cabin's owner, regularly visited the property to perform his own repairs. The parents were extremely worried, having been unable to contact their son or daughter-in-law until then. The officers learned that the house relied on generators for power, but it had no electricity at the time of the incident. The presence of gas cylinders inside the cabin led to two possible theories. The fire could have been either an accident or intentional. By Sept 15th, investigators collected evidence, including debris from a nearby fire pit, which changed the case's direction. A skull with a bullet hole was found, revealing a homicide, not an accidental fire. Forensic DNA testing showed the bullet was lodged in the victim's thigh. The skull belonged to a child, making murder the primary focus. The fire was intentionally set to destroy evidence. Next, investigators sought to determine the circumstances. Burglary gone wrong, family suicide, or a grudge against Adam Buchanan of Buchanan Construction? Investigators pursued the theory that Molly's murder was a crime of passion, examining her life for enemies and her marriage for clues. As leads dried up, they focused on the troubled relationship, marked by abuse, sleeping apart, and intense arguments. Molly's mother feared they'd kill each other, yet Molly stuck with Adam, briefly fleeing with their son. The couple enjoyed hunting near home, where guns were common. Police suspected another fight escalated. One spouse shot the other, then took their own life. However, an inconsistency emerged. If the tragedy was caused by a conflict between the husband and wife, logic dictates that the instrument of the crime would be found near the remains of one of them. But this was not the case. Investigators theorized that the weapon might have been damaged in the fire, making it less conspicuous than expected. Over 5 days, forensic team members meticulously sifted through the ashes in the home, conducting a meticulous search. Despite their thoroughness, they did not find the expected result. No weapons were discovered in the house. By this time, the forensic examination results were in. The examination confirmed that the DNA of the bodies matched Adam Buchanan, Molly McAfee, and their 8-year-old son. All 3 victims had suffered gunshot wounds prior to the fire, and the angle of the bullet wounds ruled out the possibility of suicide. The lack of firearms suggested that a 4th person, unknown until then, was present in the house, shot the Buchanans, and the investigation had to start anew. Police had no option but to turn to 16-year-old Nolan, the son of the deceased. Nolan informed the officers that his family had driven away in an old Dodge truck. According to Nolan, his father chose to use the company vehicle instead of his personal Ford, which was parked in the driveway, because the truck and trailer were already loaded with rocks to decorate the area around his country cabin. This was the truck that police found near the burned structure. When questioned about why he didn't accompany his relatives on vacation, Nolan reiterated that he had to stay behind to take care of the house and garden while his father and stepmother were away. Nolan also mentioned that there was a neighbor growing illegal marijuana on the edge of the Buchanan property, which had led to frequent arguments between his father and the neighbor, with his father demanding that the neighbor stop planting it and threatening to report the issue to the police. When discussing the family business, Nolan revealed the company's financial struggles, including downsizing and a significant reduction in employees from what his father had mentioned. The business debts were accumulating rapidly. The investigation now had valuable information and a suspect, specifically a neighbor, given the common link between violent crime and illegal drug cultivation in that area. The detectives believed the threat of reporting to the police could have led to the murder of Buchanan and his family. However, the issue was that they didn't know which neighbor they should focus on. After the family's murder, the financial crisis engulfing their business had to be addressed. On September 18th, the police visited Adam's company and questioned the employees. As Nolan had warned, The company was in dire straits, teetering on the brink of bankruptcy, with debts exceeding $30,000. As a result, some employees lost their jobs. Interestingly, some of the fired employees were bitterly unhappy with their dismissal and could potentially be suspects in the crime. During a community cleanup, students found a purse with Molly McAfee and Adam Buchanan's IDs and a .22 caliber rifle hidden nearby. This led detectives to a new theory. The killer used the rifle and took their documents to cover tracks. The discovery was crucial because it suggested that the killer had gone to great lengths to reach Greenwood, murder the family, and then return to Bonita to get rid of the evidence. This suggested that the killer was likely a local resident of Bonita. The fact that the evidence was found near the location of Buchanan construction reinforced the theory that the boss was killed by a disgruntled employee. Detectives sent the gun and the bag of documents to be examined and requested a warrant to search the company's records and premises. Here, during the search, they discovered a video surveillance camera installed on the firm's premises, which was directed not at the company's territory, but at the center of the parking lot. Since it was known that the family had gone out of town on Friday, the investigators reviewed Friday's footage and were surprised to find that Adam had attached a trailer filled with rocks to a white Ford F-150, not a Dodge truck as Nolan had initially told them. This discovery revealed that Adam had deliberately misled the investigation. If the white Ford had towed the rock trailer to the cabin, then someone must have driven it back and parked it in the driveway of the Buchanan family home. Investigators decided to re-interview Nolan, aiming to keep him safe while gathering as much information as possible. This time, they asked him specific questions, such as what movie he had seen at the cinema, how he had paid for shopping at the mall, and how he had paid for dessert on a date. Unaware of the implications, Nolan mentioned that he had used his father's credit card. The officers then applied for a warrant to search the Buchanan home in Bonita, search their vehicles, and examine their financial records. The Ford automobile sat in the driveway, its wheels caked with reddish soil, similar to that found in Greenwood. This suggested that the car had recently been driven on the dirt roads of Greenwood. If the Ford had been used for a trip earlier, some soil might have remained on the wheels, but it wouldn't have been as noticeable. Unfortunately, the fire had destroyed any wheel tread marks near the country house, but the dirt buildup indicated that the car had probably been to Greenwood recently. Further investigation revealed that Adam Buchanan had used his credit card on Friday, September 11th, at a Taco Bell fast food chain on his way to Greenwood. However, Nolan claimed he stayed home and didn't accompany his parents, and that he had the credit card in his possession. Detectives reviewed the security cameras at the diner and saw what they expected: a white Ford, not a truck. When they searched the Ford, they found a Taco Bell receipt dated September 11th that listed 4 drinks, not 3. Similarly, evidence collected at the scene of the fire pointed to 4 drink cups, indicating that Nolan had been in the car. On Saturday, September 12th, Adam and Molly used a credit card at the Valencia Club Bar in Buchanan, about 30 minutes from the cabin. This was a familiar spot for the couple, as they would often stop by after working on the cabin. Security cameras at the bar recorded the time they left, and traffic cameras on the highway helped track their route back to the cabin. The cameras showed that a Ford F-150, driven by Adam and Molly, headed towards the Buchanan cabin around 2:30 a.m. on the day of the fire. Then at 3:30 a.m., the same vehicle was spotted driving in the opposite direction, but this time with only Nolan inside. Later that morning, on Sunday, September 13th, Adam's credit card was used to make purchases at 3 different businesses in Bonita: Starbucks, McDonald's, and a gas station. The bank confirmed that Adam only had 1 credit card, which contradict Nolan's previous statements. By the time the forensic results were back, Nolan's fingerprints were found on the gun, leading to his arrest in the middle of a high school class. Nolan Buchanan maintained he was not guilty of the charges against him, and instead, he spun a tale claiming his father had shot the family, then pointed a rifle at him. Nolan said he took the weapon away in self-defense, accidentally shooting his father in the process. Nolan attributed his subsequent actions, including setting the house on fire, to a state of panic and extreme fear. Throughout the trial, the defense emphasized Adam's history of abuse towards Nolan and other family members. However, the medical examiner questioned the verdict due to the inconsistent angle of the bullet wound on Gavin's skull, suggesting it was fired at nearly a 90-degree angle. Nolan countered that he and his brother's beds were adjacent, and they were both awakened by the noise and screaming. He claimed to have seen someone enter the bedroom and shoot Gavin, then pointed the rifle at him. According to Nolan, he pushed the attacker away, which would have resulted in a shot fired at around a 45 degrees angle, contradicting the forensic evidence. The prosecution's theory is that Nolan killed his brother when they were alone in the house, while their parents were out at a bar. After waiting for his father and stepmother to return, Nolan shot and killed them as well, as evidenced by the position of the bodies. The sequence of events suggests that Adam was killed first, followed by Molly. Next, Nolan took the rifle, his parents' papers, doused the bodies with gasoline, and set the house on fire. He then went home, met up with his girlfriend, and spent the day with her, thereby establishing an alibi for himself. On July 13, 2018, a jury delivered a guilty verdict on 3 counts of first-degree murder against Nolan. As a result, he was sentenced to 150 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 25 years. In announcing the sentence, Judge Kingsbury acknowledged the verbal and physical abuse Nolan had suffered, as well as the testimony that he killed his brother to spare him from further suffering at their father's hands. However, she also highlighted the premeditation of the crime, the subsequent arson, the creation of alibis, and Nolan's plans to take over the family business, which he had shared with relatives. The judge referenced Nolan's failure to comply with rules and erratic behavior, as reported by staff at the South Lake Tahoe Juvenile Treatment Center, where he was sent following his arrest. The judge informed Nolan that he, like anyone, has the opportunity to reform, and that if he exhibits good behavior, he may be eligible for parole in 25 years. Despite this, Nolan maintains his innocence, and if he is eventually granted parole, he will be required to pay a substantial amount of compensation to the victims, the exact sum of which has not yet been determined. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Ryan Poston. Ryan Poston was born on December 30, 1982, in Fort Mitchell, Kentucky, to Lisa and Jay Poston. He had a strong and loving bond with his 3 sisters, Allison, Catherine, and Elizabeth, throughout his life. Growing up, Ryan had the opportunity to travel extensively and attend schools in Switzerland and the Philippines. This exposure broadened his horizons and gave him an adventurous spirit. Ryan was also known for his striking good looks, which, coupled with his charismatic personality, made him stand out in a crowd. After graduating from high school, Ryan attended Indiana University, where he earned a degree in political science, history, and geography. He excelled academically and graduated with honors in 2005. Following in the footsteps of his family members, Ryan pursued a career in law. He enrolled in the Salmon P. Chase College of Law at Northern Kentucky University, driven by his admiration for the legal profession. His esteemed grandfather and uncle, both practicing attorneys, were his role models. Ryan's ultimate goal was to own a successful law firm. While in Cincinnati, Ohio, Ryan dedicated himself to helping people who couldn't afford expensive lawyers. Despite being young, he had already built a strong reputation, and many sought his advice. He worked hard to ensure everyone had access to fair and competent legal representation, regardless of their financial situation. After a painful breakup in 2011, Ryan turned to his cousin Carissa for comfort and support. During a visit to Lexington, Kentucky to spend time with her, he met Shayna Hubers, a Lexington native, and his life took an unexpected turn. Shayna Hubers embodied the quintessential Southern girl, renowned for her outgoing personality and effortless ability to form friendships. Her warm and charming demeanor naturally drew people to her. After graduating high school in 2009 with a full scholarship, she continued her education at the University of Kentucky, majoring in psychology, before pursuing her master's degree in psychology at Eastern Kentucky University. Despite their 8-year age gap, Ryan was 29, while Shayna was just 21. Their feelings for each other grew increasingly undeniable. With each visit Ryan made to see his cousin Carissa in Lexington, he found himself devoting more time to Shayna. As they spent more time together, their bond deepened. Shayna began spending more time in Highland Heights, the Kentucky suburb where Ryan lived. Every weekend, she would pack a bag and visit Ryan's home, dedicating herself to taking care of him, cooking his meals, and cleaning his living space. As time went on, Ryan and Shayna's relationship grew stronger, and he took her to meet his parents. She was over the moon with excitement, telling her friends all about Ryan and even saying she wanted to become Mrs. Ryan Poston. But their promising future came to a tragic end on October 12, 2012. In a panicked call to the police, Shayna admitted to fatally shooting her boyfriend, Ryan. The details she shared revealed a devastating scene of domestic violence that had spun out of control. According to Shayna, Ryan had tried to physically abuse her, dragging her out of the house when she attempted to gather her belongings. She told the 911 dispatcher that Ryan had confronted her with a gun, leading to a physical fight. In the heat of the moment, Shayna managed to grab the gun, but she was intimidated by Ryan's size. In a state of panic, she pulled the trigger, ultimately shooting Ryan. Shayna admitted that she believed Ryan's death was inevitable, so she claimed she wanted to end his suffering. She told the 911 dispatcher that Ryan was in distress, making unusual sounds, which motivated her to shoot him several more times. Afterwards, she revealed that she left the gun on a bookshelf. Minutes after Shayna called 911 to report that she had shot her boyfriend, officers were sent to the scene. When they arrived, they told Shayna to come out of the apartment with her hands up. At first, she was hesitant, but she eventually followed their orders. As she walked out, they told her to lie face down on the ground. It was clear that Shayna was very upset as she complied with their instructions. After the officers handcuffed Shayna and put her in the back of their patrol car, they entered the apartment and found Ryan Poston's body on the dining room floor, covered in blood. Crime scene investigators arrived and examined Ryan's condo, which looked a bit messy, but nothing out of the ordinary for a 29-year-old man. They found that Ryan had a concealed carry permit and owned weapons, including the Sig Sauer semi-automatic gun that Shayna used to shoot him. Based on the evidence they gathered, the investigators concluded that Ryan was sitting at the table when Shayna opened fire. They knew this because of the blood found on the table. However, the fact that several items on the dining room table were not disturbed raised doubts about Shayna's story. If there had been a fight, the items would have been disturbed. The crime scene investigators thoroughly searched Ryan's apartment, gathering every detail. At the same time, police officers questioned Ryan's neighbors to see if they had any information that could help the case. One of Ryan's neighbors, a woman named Nikki, spoke to the detective and provided some useful insights. Nikki knew Shayna well and thought that Shayna was more committed to Ryan than he was to her. According to Nikki, the couple often had loud, angry arguments that disturbed the neighborhood. Nikki remembered a specific incident several months ago when Shayna came to her door in tears, saying she was afraid of Ryan. Shayna had told Nikki that she and Ryan had a violent fight, during which he lifted her up and threw her down the hallway, causing her injuries. Nikki believed Shayna and encouraged her to report the abuse to the police, but Shayna decided not to take legal action. At the police station, detectives took Shayna to an interrogation room to question her about the shooting of her boyfriend, Ryan. Before starting the interview, the officers read Shayna her Miranda rights, reminding her that she had the right to have an attorney present. Shayna chose to exercise this right and asked for a lawyer to be present. While waiting in the interrogation room, Shayna filled out some paperwork under the supervision of a detective. Despite having asked for a lawyer, Shayna still chatted with the detective. When asked who the victim was, Shayna calmly replied that it was the man she had killed. This response showed a clear lack of emotion, as it was obvious she knew the victim was Ryan, her long-term boyfriend. Shayna remained in the interrogation room with the detectives, maintaining that she had acted in self-defense. She recounted the events of the previous night, describing how Ryan had allegedly grabbed her by the throat and violently thrown her around the apartment. At some point during the investigation, the detective temporarily left the room, replaced by another officer. Shayna began to reveal more details about her encounter with Ryan to this new officer. She alleged that Ryan had been extremely aggressive prior to the shooting, hurling insults at her, calling her crazy, and taunting her while brandishing a gun. Shayna believed that Ryan's behavior that night was fueled by drug use, which contributed to his violent outbursts. Throughout the interview, Shayna consistently stuck to her version of the events that culminated in the shooting. She claimed that Ryan was sitting at the dining room table, handling ammunition for his Sig Sauer pistol, when she noticed him staring aggressively at her from across the table. At that moment, she became aware of his intentions and realized he was trying to evict her from his condo. Shayna confessed to picking up the gun and firing it in the midst of the chaos, hitting Ryan with a single bullet. Shayna continued to describe the incident, claiming that after shooting Ryan once, she saw him twitching. Believing it was necessary to end his suffering, she fired multiple shots, ultimately killing him. In her confession, Shayna told the detective that Ryan was vain and had mentioned wanting a nose job, so she decided to grant him his wish. She deliberately aimed her gun at his face and pulled the trigger, essentially giving him the rhinoplasty he had requested. During the intense interrogation, Shayna expressed deep concerns about the impact of the incident on her academic performance and her future romantic relationships. She confided in the detective that having a dead boyfriend would make it difficult for her to find someone to marry, especially if they discovered she had killed him in self-defense. Despite her statement, the detective arrested and charged her with Ryan's murder. Shayna seemed genuinely surprised by her arrest, maintaining that she had acted in self-defense. In 2015, Shayna's trial began, and the courtroom was filled with anticipation. The prosecutor compared Shayna to Jodi Arias, who had also been charged with murdering her boyfriend, Travis Alexander, emphasizing the striking similarities between the two cases. This heightened the tension in the courtroom as everyone awaited the outcome. The prosecutor argued that Shayna was fixated on her ex-boyfriend, Ryan. According to the prosecution, Ryan dominated Shayna's thoughts, and she constantly discussed him. During the trial, the prosecutor presented testimony from Ryan's friends, who described his plans to end the relationship with Shayna and his efforts to avoid her phone calls and messages. Despite this, Shayna continued to visit Ryan's condo in Highland Heights uninvited, including on the night of the murder. The prosecution introduced evidence that Ryan had scheduled a date with Audrey Bolt, a former Miss Ohio, on the night of the murder. This information supported the prosecution's theory that Shayna was driven by jealousy and anger towards Ryan's potential new love interest. Audrey Bolt testified that she was supposed to meet Ryan for drinks at a bar on the night of the murder, but he failed to appear. It wasn't until later that she learned of his murder. The prosecution also presented evidence that Ryan had repeatedly expressed his desire to end the relationship with Shayna in the days leading up to his death. Ryan had sought advice from his father, Jay, on how to handle the situation, and Jay had counseled him to be kind to Shayna to avoid a messy breakup. However, it appears that Shayna continued to exert control over Ryan on the day he was killed. The prosecution presented evidence of several text exchanges between Ryan and Shayna, in which Ryan clearly told her he did not want to see her that weekend because he had other commitments. Nevertheless, Shayna showed up uninvited at his condo, which was not unusual for her. The argument that ensued reached a boiling point when Ryan explicitly told Shayna their relationship was over and she could no longer control him. Prosecutors argued that this statement enraged Shayna, prompting her to pick up a gun and fatally shoot Ryan. During Shayna's trial for murdering Ryan, the prosecution showed a video of her being questioned by the police to suggest she was a cold-blooded killer. In the video, Shayna's calm behavior and responses seemed to back up the idea that she had intentionally taken Ryan's life. The footage showed her dancing and singing along to music, which seemed unusual for someone who had just killed their loved one in self-defense. Normally, people in such a situation would be distraught and crying due to the loss of life and the weight of their actions. The prosecution's goal in showing the video was to make Shayna appear detached and unemotional, implying that her actions were not those of someone who had acted in self-defense. They claimed that her lack of tears and carefree behavior proved her guilt. However, this interpretation was open to debate and up to the jury to decide. In the end, the video was a key piece of evidence in the prosecution's case against Shayna, but it was just one part of the evidence presented during the trial. Shayna's defense team stuck to a clear storyline throughout her trial, arguing that Ryan was the aggressive and violent one on the night of the incident, leading Shayna to shoot him. To back up this claim, they built a picture of Ryan's mental state, suggesting that a mix of drugs he was taking, including anti-anxiety medications and amphetamines, contributed significantly to his behavior. The defense team presented the jury with autopsy results showing the presence of these drugs in Ryan's system, strengthening their argument that the drugs influenced his actions. An expert toxicologist testified for Shayna, stating that a combination of drugs like anti-anxiety medications and amphetamines could cause someone to become violent and paranoid. This testimony aimed to provide a reasonable explanation for Shayna's actions, implying that she may not have intended to harm Ryan. During Shayna's trial in April 2015, the prosecution grew increasingly worried that she might be acquitted due to being a smart, young, and attractive woman, and that her self-defense claim might persuade the jury. However, on April 23rd, the jury delivered a guilty verdict, convicting Shayna of murdering her boyfriend, Ryan Poston. At the August 2015 sentencing hearing, Shayna persisted in shifting the blame for Ryan's death onto him, which infuriated his friends and family. Despite the overwhelming evidence presented during the trial, Shayna stuck to her claim of innocence and refused to acknowledge her role in the events. Under Kentucky law, a defendant who is deemed a victim of domestic violence can be eligible for early parole after serving just 20% of their sentence. However, the judge in this case ruled that Shayna did not meet the criteria, characterizing her crime as a premeditated murder. As a result, the judge handed down a 40-year prison sentence, making Shayna eligible for parole in 17 years, when she will be 41 years old in 2032. Shayna Hubers was sentenced, but she appealed for a new trial, which was granted by a judge in August 2016. The reason for the appeal was that one of the jurors had failed to disclose their felony conviction, which is against Kentucky law since felons are not allowed to serve on juries. Following a 4-month delay, Shayna's second trial for the murder of Ryan Poston began in August 2018. During the opening arguments, Shayna's defense attorney claimed that throughout her year-and-a-half-long relationship with Ryan, Shayna tried her best to make him happy. However, their romance suffered because of it. The attorney stated that on the very first night Shayna and Ryan met, he was violent toward her, both physically and sexually. This incident had a lasting effect on her, and it took her several weeks to respond to his messages after that. Shayna's defense lawyers claimed that her high school experience of sexual assault led to a history of alcohol abuse and promiscuity. They argued that this traumatic event contributed to her behavior on the night of the murder. The defense team aimed to create a sympathetic image of Shayna, highlighting her troubled past and arguing that she was not responsible for her actions on the night of the murder. They sought to challenge the prosecution's narrative, suggesting that her behavior was the result of a combination of factors, including a history of abuse and a toxic relationship with Ryan. The defense portrayed Shayna as a victim of domestic violence at Ryan's hands, rather than as a cold-blooded murderer. They claimed that her actions were driven not by a desire for revenge or financial gain, but by years of abuse by her former partner. According to the defense, Ryan constantly criticized Shayna about her weight and chest size, pressuring her to enlarge her breasts. This constant pressure contributed to her low self-esteem and feelings of inadequacy, the defense argued. The defense claimed that Ryan and Shayna's sexual relationship was troubled, marked by frequent disagreements and frustration from both parties. According to the defense, Ryan yearned for a more romantic and intimate connection, but this desire was not fulfilled, leading to a growing rift between them. To support this claim, the defense presented evidence that Shayna had sought an injection to improve her romantic life, which was meant to address the couple's sexual difficulties and strengthen their bond. However, the defense argued that Ryan's consistent rejection and disinterest worsened the strain on their relationship, causing Shayna to become increasingly frustrated and isolated. Moreover, the defense alleged that Ryan often broke up with Shayna, only to engage in conversations with other women. In contrast, the prosecution stated that while Ryan Poston was not a perfect boyfriend, he was not abusive. They argued that Shayna did not act in self-defense when she fatally shot Ryan, but rather because he had ended their relationship that night. The prosecution claimed that it was time for Ryan to break up with Shayna, as she refused to leave him alone despite the breakup, demonstrating her inability to move on from the relationship. One of Ryan's co-workers testified that the breakup between Ryan and Shayna would be permanent this time because Ryan had always avoided breaking up with Shayna in person. According to the co-worker, Shayna had made every effort to keep Ryan. The prosecution presented text messages in which Shayna told her friends that she and Ryan's romantic encounters had brought them closer together. However, Shayna testified that these encounters had actually driven them apart. In another text message exchange, Shayna asked Ryan for sex, but Ryan was taking antidepressants, which had reduced his sex drive due to the medication's side effects. However, when Shayna testified, she claimed that Ryan had forced her into sexual intercourse. After 5 hours of deliberation, the jury found Shayna guilty of murdering Ryan despite contradictory testimonies and conflicting evidence. During the sentencing hearing, Shayna's mother emotionally addressed the judge, sharing stories of her daughter's singing talent, which had earned her multiple college scholarships. Through tears, she begged the jury to consider granting Shayna parole, arguing that her daughter still had the potential to positively impact people's lives. The mother acknowledged, however, that her pleas did not minimize the grief and pain experienced by Ryan Poston's family. Shayna was given a life sentence with no chance of parole. As part of her sentence, she must serve at least 17 years before becoming eligible for parole in 2032. She is currently serving her sentence at the Kentucky Correctional Institute for Women in Pewee Valley, Kentucky. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Sierra Jugan. Sierra Jugan was a young woman who captivated everyone with her joyful personality. Her happy and humorous nature made her the center of attention wherever she went. She had a lively, cheeky personality that brought immense happiness to those around her. Even when she made mistakes, she had a special way of making her mom smile. As Sierra entered high school, she continued to showcase her adventurous spirit. She boldly took on new experiences, including playing volleyball. Whether on or off the court, she displayed a remarkable level of comfort and confidence. On July 19, 2016, the Jen family returned from their vacation and began unpacking. Sierra was looking forward to the fall semester at the University of Tu, where she planned to study abroad. Her mom wanted to discuss her plans with her, but Sierra, being an athletic person, was eager to try out her new bike. So whenever she had the time, she was keen to take a ride. Before leaving the house, Sierra told her mom that she was heading to her boyfriend Josh's house. Her mom acknowledged her plans and told her she would see her later, around 1:05 p.m. Sierra looked cute, with her hair tied up in a ponytail, wearing shorts and a tank top as she set out on her ride. Josh, Sierra's boyfriend, called her home phone because he was worried about her whereabouts. He had tried calling her phone several times, but it kept going straight to voicemail. When Josh asked Sierra's mom if she was home, she said no. Josh told Sierra's mom that Sierra had left his house around 7 p.m., and he hadn't seen or heard from her since then. Sierra's mom knew something was wrong because Sierra always answered her phone. Her first thought was to call Sierra's grandparents who lived nearby, but they said Sierra wasn't with them. Sierra's family and Josh started searching for her, worried about her safety. Sierra's mom quickly got in her car and started driving around, looking carefully at every possible place Sierra could be, including the sides of the road. Sierra's aunt, uncle, and cousin also joined the search, thinking Sierra might have been in an accident and got hit by a car. As time went by, worry grew. The possibility of Sierra being hurt, maybe with a broken leg, weighed heavily on their minds. Despite their relentless efforts and exhaustive search, they couldn't find any trace of Sierra. When Sierra's mom got home, she immediately took to social media, reaching out to Sierra's friends, desperately hoping someone had seen or heard from her. But to her dismay, there was complete silence. Hours passed, and still, there was no sign of Sierra. Filled with worry, Sierra's mom knew every minute counted and decided to call the police. Just an hour later, a concerned neighbor called Sierra's family saying County Road 6 was blocked off. With their hearts racing, Sierra's family rushed out to see what was happening. They were met by a chaotic scene surrounded by officers who refused to let them through. The officers stayed tight-lipped about Sierra, leaving her mom in a state of panic. She couldn't help but wonder if the police had found her missing daughter. The small-town police officers, seeking answers, decided to seek the FBI's assistance. They promised to deliver any information they could to Sierra's family as soon as possible. Understandably, the family found themselves unable to sleep, remaining wide awake and contemplating their next course of action. The following day, Sierra's mom and aunt took matters into their own hands, refusing to wait for answers. Her mom made a series of calls to hospitals, desperately searching for any signs of an unidentified female patient that might be Sierra. Despite call after call, they turned up nothing, leaving them feeling increasingly hopeless. A lead emerged from Detroit, Michigan, offering a glimmer of hope in the search for Sierra. A young woman, bearing a striking resemblance to her, had been admitted to a hospital with severe injuries, including numerous broken bones, after escaping from a moving vehicle with no identification. In an effort to confirm her identity, a nurse asked Sierra's family to describe any distinguishing marks on her body. Sierra's mom recalled a scar on her calf and a pierced belly button, which seemed to match the hospitalized girl's features, raising the family's hopes that they had finally found Sierra. Unfortunately, their hopes were soon dashed when they discovered that the girl in the hospital was not Sierra, leaving the family devastated and heartbroken after investing so much hope and anticipation in the possibility. Later that morning, the police visited Sierra's house to brief them on the previous night's events. One of the officers had found a trampled cornfield near where he'd parked his car and approached the area. He noticed signs of a struggle and a motorcycle track inside the cornfield. Not wanting to disturb any potential evidence, he backed away without touching anything. As he retreated, he caught a glimpse of a reflection: Sierra's purple bike. Further investigation uncovered several items at the scene: a pair of men's sunglasses, a pair of women's sunglasses, a blood-stained sock, and a screwdriver. Based on these discoveries, The police concluded that Sierra was likely abducted from that location. During the investigation, detectives thoroughly questioned Sierra's friends and family to gather information about her boyfriend Josh. They learned that Sierra and Josh had been inseparable since they were 7 years old, and their friendship developed into a romantic relationship in their first year of high school. The couple was known for their energetic and carefree nature, sharing a passion for skiing, among other things. After high school, Sierra went to the University of Toledo, while Josh enrolled at Bowling Green, but despite the physical distance, their commitment to each other remained strong. They often talked about getting married in the future, although Sierra emphasized her priority on completing her education before settling down, showcasing her academic dedication. Detectives investigating the case found that Sierra had visited Josh's house in the early afternoon on July 19th. According to the gathered information, Sierra decided to leave Josh's house and head home around 6:30 p.m. Because he was worried about her safety, Josh joined Sierra on her ride home, riding alongside her on his motorcycle. After a few miles, Sierra told Josh to turn back and go home, wanting to ride her bike alone and prove her independence. Josh reluctantly agreed, and they parted ways, with Josh heading back on his motorcycle and Sierra continuing her ride. During the investigation, detectives discovered motorcycle tracks in the nearby corn stalks, not far from Sierra's bike. This raised the question of whether these tracks belonged to Josh's motorcycle, and detectives couldn't ignore the possible connection. They began a thorough investigation to determine if there was any evidence linking Josh to the scene where Sierra went missing. As a result, detectives set up a command post to gather all relevant clues about Sierra's disappearance. A promising lead emerged quickly. A local resident came forward, saying that on July 14th, while driving, he saw a motorcycle helmet on the side of the road. He asked his son to retrieve it and put it in their truck. Later, after learning about Sierra's disappearance, he examined the helmet more closely and found red stains, which he suspected were blood. The helmet was discovered near the cornfield where Sierra's bike was found. The detectives asked Josh about his helmet, and to their relief, he produced it, confirming he had it with him. Furthermore, they verified that Josh had returned home after the interview with his parents, ruling him out as a suspect due to his solid alibi. Despite being visibly shaken, Josh was not suspected by Sierra's family in connection with her disappearance. The detectives focused on identifying the owner of a blood-stained motorcycle helmet found on the roadside. Recognizing the significance of DNA evidence, they sent the helmet to the crime lab for testing, awaiting the results with anticipation, hoping for a breakthrough in their investigation. Community unites in search for Sierra, organizing parties to scour every area for clues. Townspeople work together, fueled by a deep sense of unity, to bring her home safely. Hundreds gather at a candlelight vigil, sending thoughts and prayers for her return. 2 days after Sierra vanished, the police got a tip about a suspicious van speeding through the area where she was last seen. People thought she might have been kidnapped and forced into sex trafficking. The tipster gave the police the van's license plate number. The police interviewed the van's owner, but it turned out the van had nothing to do with Sierra's disappearance. The owner explained that he sped up because another car suddenly appeared from behind, which might have been a family member looking for Sierra, and he panicked. By the 48-hour mark, the investigation had turned up no leads on Sierra's whereabouts. As time goes on, her family is struggling to stay hopeful. With each passing day, the chances of finding her alive get smaller and smaller. Despite trying to stay positive, the harsh reality of the situation is getting harder to ignore. The police went from door to door searching for Sierra, and their investigation eventually took them to a farm near where her bike was found. The farm, which covered an acre of land, had several buildings including a small house, a trailer, and a large barn. The owner of the property was James Worley. When the police arrived at the farm, they started talking to James Worley. They asked him about the day Sierra went missing, hoping he could tell them something about her disappearance. But what James said shocked them. He told them he had been out riding his motorcycle that day, but it broke down, and he lost some things along the way, including a screwdriver and his helmet. This was surprising because those were the same items found at the scene where Sierra was taken. By saying this, James had unintentionally put himself at the scene of the crime, which made the detectives very suspicious of him and his connection to Sierra's disappearance. The police were determined to delve deeper into their investigation, and they questioned James Worley. During the questioning, they noticed something that caught their attention: scratches on his face. It was clear that he had been involved in a struggle, and this discovery only increased their suspicions about him, raising more questions. The detectives wondered if these scratches were the result of a confrontation with the missing girl, Sierra. After questioning James Worley about Sierra's disappearance, the detectives returned to the police station. They decided to conduct a background check on him, hoping to uncover relevant information as they looked into his past. But what they discovered sent chills down their spines. James Worley had a dark criminal history, including a previous attempt to abduct a young woman 26 years earlier on July 4, 1989. The woman's name was Robin Garter. On July 4, 1989, 26-year-old Robin Garter was getting ready to attend a neighborhood picnic. While her mother was busy preparing potato salad and making final arrangements for the event, Robin decided to squeeze in a bike ride beforehand. However, she had forgotten to bring water and was now struggling with the intense heat. As she considered turning back home to quench her thirst, Robin heard the sound of a car approaching from behind. Robin thought that after the vehicle passed her, she would head back home. But before she could react, the car crashed into her bike, sending her flying into a nearby ditch. She was stunned and disoriented. The driver stopped and got out, looking concerned and trying to figure out what had happened. But then things took a dark turn. The person who had hit her suddenly revealed sinister intentions. Without warning, he hit her hard on the back of the head. As she struggled to understand what was happening, the attacker held a screwdriver to her throat, threatening to kill her in a menacing tone. He ordered her to get up and get into his car right away. The man forced Robin into his car at screwdriver point, trying to handcuff her once she was inside. He managed to cuff one wrist, but Robin fought back fiercely, preventing him from cuffing the other. She screamed for help at the top of her lungs, but her cries were drowned out by the empty cornfields, with no one around to hear her. Robin's fierce resistance against her attacker left her on the brink of unconsciousness multiple times, but she refused to give up. Just as the silence was becoming unsettling, she picked up the faint sound of a motorcycle in the distance. As she strained her eyes, she saw it approaching the car where her captor was. Realizing this might be her only chance to escape, Robin waved her arms wildly to get the rider's attention. Luckily, the rider noticed her distress signals and brought the motorcycle to a stop. In a desperate bid for help, Robin explained that the man was trying to kill her. Without hesitation, she seized the opportunity and quickly climbed onto the back of the motorcycle, leaving her captor and the car behind. The motorcycle rider drove Robin home, where she collapsed. Robin's mother called the police and an ambulance, and Robin was rushed to the hospital for medical treatment. The motorcyclist, determined to help the authorities, led the police back to the scene of the incident. To their surprise, they found James Worley still present, waiting with his car. When questioned, James was fully cooperative and provided identification to prove who he was. However, his version of events differed significantly from initial assumptions. James strongly denied any intention of kidnapping Robin. According to his account, Robin was riding her bike erratically, swerving into the road, making it impossible for him to avoid hitting her. James claimed that after the accident, Robin became hysterical, and he restrained her with handcuffs not to harm her, but to secure her to the steering wheel of his truck while he sought help. He insisted his actions were driven by genuine concern for Robin's well-being. James Worley was arrested in 1989 for trying to abduct Robin. He was found guilty of abduction and sentenced to 6 to 10 years in the state prison in Mansfield, Ohio. Due to good behavior, he was released 3 years later. When Robin found out that James was released, she was terrified. The fear of James potentially striking again weighed heavily on her mind. With information about James Worley's criminal history in hand, the police obtained a search warrant and went to his home. When they arrived, they started searching the house, which James shared with his mother. At first, everything seemed normal. Next, they turned their attention to the large backyard, methodically searching the outdoor area. The officers then discovered a barn located in the corner of the yard, which sparked their curiosity. They approached the structure cautiously. Inside the barn, the police found stacks of hay bales. They searched the barn carefully, looking for any evidence that might connect James to Cece's disappearance. The detectives examined every nook and cranny, checking each bale of hay for hidden items or clues. As they removed the bales of hay from James Worley's barn, the detectives noticed a small green crate in the corner. They approached it cautiously and opened it, finding bags of underwear, stockings, and tube tops. Each item was neatly labeled and sealed in a plastic Ziploc bag. As the detectives searched through the items, they were shocked to see a pair of purple panties with what looked like bloodstains. This discovery filled them with a sense of dread, and they wondered what other disturbing things they might find in their search of James Worley's barn. The detectives quickly spotted a piece of plywood on the ground and recognized its potential importance. They carefully lifted the plywood, exposing a small freezer buried in the barn. When they opened the freezer, they were met with a strong, unpleasant smell, similar to bleach, which heightened their suspicions. As they continued their investigation, they found other disturbing objects hidden behind hay bales, including a stained air mattress that hinted at a dark history. The presence of zip ties, duct tape, handcuffs, and keys added to their concerns, as these items are commonly used in abductions and other criminal activities. The detectives decided to send all the items taken from the property for DNA testing. Worley attempted to explain the items as part of a porn business he claimed to be planning, but the evidence against him was too strong to ignore. The combination of the disturbing discoveries at the crime scene and the incriminating items led to James's arrest for Sierra's murder. Sierra's family was stunned to learn that her abductor was someone who lived far away from her home. This news sparked a million questions in her mind, with the most pressing one being where she was. The detectives launched a thorough investigation of James's property, meticulously searching every inch of it and leaving no stone unturned. They brought in cadaver dogs to help detect any potential remains. The detectives focused on a pond on the property, recognizing its potential significance. They carefully drained it to uncover any evidence hidden beneath the water's surface. They also inspected the insulation in the front of the attic. As the investigation progressed, they extended their search to the neighboring properties, considering the possibility that evidence might have been dispersed beyond James's property. They pursued leads in all directions, diligence and thoroughness guiding their efforts. A farmer was walking through his vast field when he received a call. As he walked, he noticed a peculiar area of corn that was matted down and decided to take a closer look. When he approached the spot, he saw a nearby mound of dirt, which immediately made him think it could be a grave. This worried him even more because of the recent search for Sierra. With this on his mind, he quickly called the police, telling them about his suspicions and giving them the exact location. Responding promptly to the farmer's distress call, the police arrived at the scene. They noticed a fresh pile of dirt, which fueled their suspicion that it could be a grave. Taking the situation seriously, they began processing the area carefully to avoid disturbing any potential evidence. The officers examined every inch of the scene, hoping to find clues about Sierra's whereabouts. However, Despite their thorough efforts, their search yielded no results. The detectives then searched the adjoining farms for Sierra, using drones and helicopters to cover a larger area and increase their chances of locating her. During their search, they found another mound of dirt with freshly matted corn. Their trained dogs detected the scent of decomposition, suggesting a potential crime scene. As the crime scene investigators dug, they made a grim discovery. They found human remains. Based on the evidence, it was believed to be Sierra's body. Tragically, her hands were bound behind her back, and her feet were tied to the handcuffs. Further examination revealed that an object was lodged in her mouth, restricting her airway, which ultimately led to her death. Later that night, the Sierra family received a devastating call they had been fearing. The police had found Sierra's lifeless body. The news was met with an overwhelming outpouring of grief as the entire family broke down in tears. The sorrow felt by each family member was palpable, and the weight of the moment was crushing. A month after Sierra's tragic abduction and murder, James Worley was charged with 19 counts, including kidnapping and aggravated murder. 2 years later, Worley's trial began. Despite the overwhelming evidence against him, he pleaded not guilty to all charges. Over 8 intense days, the prosecution presented a gripping story that captivated the jury and spectators alike. After deliberating for 6 hours, the jury found Worley guilty on all counts related to Sierra's murder. The severity of the crime led to Worley being sentenced to death. Friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Mary Catherine Higdon. Mary Catherine Higdon, born in 1994, was a lively child who spread joy wherever she went. Her infectious laughter and humor brought delight to those around her, often with her quick wit and impressive impersonations. She loved taking leisurely strolls around town with her pet frog perched on a shoestring, proudly showing it off to everyone. From a young age, Mary had a deep appreciation for nature and animals, spending hours exploring the outdoors and marveling at the beauty of the natural world. Aside from being an entertainment enthusiast, Mary had a passion for performing. She would often stage plays for her family, captivating them with her creativity and boundless imagination. As she grew older, Mary was introduced to firearms and developed a strong interest in them. She learned the importance of handling guns responsibly, respecting their power and potential. Over time, her skills improved, and she became an accomplished marksman with a growing passion for guns. Mary Catherine met her soulmate, Stephen Freeman, in high school. Born on January 1, 1995, in Griffin, Georgia, Stephen grew up in a close-knit family with his parents and brother. He was a happy child with many friends who described him as laid-back, kind, and helpful. Stephen's family was very important to him, especially his mother, with whom he shared a special bond. He loved spending time outdoors, enjoying activities like hiking, camping, fishing, and hunting. Mary Catherine and Stephen quickly formed a strong connection in high school, united by their shared passion for the outdoors. Their love for nature brought them together, and their relationship flourished as they explored the great outdoors, whether hiking, camping, fishing, or hunting. This connection served as the foundation of their deep and enduring relationship. Mary Catherine and Stephen's high school graduation marked the start of a new era in their lives as a couple. They decided to take their relationship to the next level by moving in together in a house in Griffin, Georgia. The couple was ecstatic about having their own space and starting a new life. Mary Catherine had become an integral part of Stephen's family, with his mother treating her like a daughter. She welcomed Mary Catherine into their family with open arms, and the couple felt grateful for her love and support. Every Sunday, Mary Catherine and Stephen would visit Stephen's parents for a big family dinner. This weekly tradition brought the family closer together and solidified Mary Catherine's place within it. Over time, Stephen's friends also grew to appreciate Mary Catherine. Initially, they had reservations about the couple's relationship, but as they spent more time together, they realized how well-suited the pair were. They admired how Mary Catherine brought happiness and joy into Stephen's life and shared his passion for the outdoors. Stephen, a metal worker, repaired roofs. His wife, Mary Catherine, had two jobs: part-time teacher's assistant and sales at a sporting goods store, where she learned gun safety from co-worker Thomas Skinner. This complemented Stephen's passion for firearms as an avid hunter and target shooter with multiple guns, including a Glock 42 at home for protection. By summer 2018, Mary Catherine and Stephen had been in a 5-year relationship in Griffin, Georgia. Tragically, it came to an end on August 1st. That day, Mary Catherine made a frantic 911 call, screaming that she had accidentally shot Stephen. When police arrived at their apartment, they found Mary Catherine in a state of distress, crying and hyperventilating over Stephen's motionless body. Despite his still being alive with a chest wound, Mary Catherine was screaming that she couldn't lose him. An ambulance rushed Stephen to the hospital, where doctors made efforts to save his life. But unfortunately, he eventually succumbed to his injuries. Mary Catherine visited the police station to explain the shooting incident. She claimed that she had accidentally shot Stephen while handing him a gun, which he normally kept beside his bed for protection. However, the police officers detected the smell of alcohol on her breath and noticed discrepancies in her account, which shifted from handing the gun to tossing it. The police were skeptical, knowing that a tossed gun would not fire on its own, and the nature of the wound suggested that Mary Catherine had deliberately pointed the gun at Stephen. During the interview, Mary Catherine eventually confessed that she had acted out of anger. Although the police had recorded the interview, there was only feedback during the crucial moment when she admitted to shooting Stephen out of anger. Nevertheless, despite the missing recording, the police were convinced that they had collected sufficient forensic evidence to prove that Mary Catherine had intentionally shot her boyfriend Stephen. At the apartment of Mary Catherine and Stephen, police found evidence of a heated argument before Stephen was shot. Scattered food suggested a prior altercation. This was the 6th time police had been called to the residence in the past year due to domestic disturbances. Despite Mary Catherine's claims, the gun used in the shooting was found to have been loaded that night. Traces of grease on the gun and magazine led the police to conclude that Mary Catherine, who was cooking dinner at the time, had loaded the weapon after shooting Stephen. Stephen's friends told police their relationship was marked by frequent arguments, possessiveness, and verbal abuse from Mary Catherine. Friends saw her as mentally unstable, causing tension. When Stephen tried to distance himself, she'd bombard him with texts and calls, forcing him to block her. One friend revealed Mary Catherine pulled a gun on Stephen multiple times, but he didn't report it, fearing trouble for her. Stephen's friends were stunned when they learned that Mary Catherine had accidentally shot him, especially since they knew she was familiar with firearms. However, what they were unaware of was that 3 months earlier, Stephen had confided in a friend that Mary Catherine had a disturbing episode where she ran around outside, screaming at the top of her lungs, and even attempted to shoot both him and herself. Furthermore, just a month before the incident, Stephen had shared with another friend that although Mary Catherine had previously threatened him with a gun, this time her eyes had a look that genuinely terrified him, making him believe she might actually carry out her threat. Stephen's friends told police he'd been tired of Mary Catherine's behavior and planned to leave her after 7 years. He intended to move away without telling her, fearing her reaction. On July 30th, 2018, Stephen sent Mary Catherine a friendly text, but the next night, he ignored her calls and texts after a fight. Mary Catherine was cooking dinner when she noticed Stephen was missing. She called his mom, who said he was with a friend. Enraged, Mary Catherine drove to the friend's house to confront him. When she arrived, she saw Stephen in the truck and began yelling at him. He tried to calm her down, saying he was heading home. Stephen's friend said Mary Catherine pulled a gun on him multiple times, but she denied it. She admitted threatening suicide with a gun, though. His mom believed Mary Catherine's threats kept Stephen from leaving, fearing she'd harm herself if he did. Mary Catherine said Stephen escalated the situation, becoming violent, throwing dinner in her face. She claimed self-defense, grabbing a gun to scare him off, but he lunged at her, and as she backed away, she saw he was bleeding from the chest. At the time of the shooting, Mary Catherine didn't share her account of events with the police because she was too embarrassed to reveal that Stephen had a history of violence towards her, including hitting her in the past and being controlling. In fact, she claimed that on one occasion, he kicked her out of bed so forcefully that her head hit the door frame. However, Stephen's friends described their relationship differently, saying they had seen Mary Catherine hit Stephen, including an incident where she slapped him hard in the face. By contrast, Mary Catherine's sister offered a different view, stating that 2 weeks before the shooting, she had seen bruises on Mary Catherine's arm. Mary Catherine's sister said Mary Catherine confided in her about Stephen's physical attack. The police investigation found Stephen's death was a murder. Mary Catherine was arrested and charged with murder and other crimes. She refused a plea deal and chose to go to trial, claiming she shot Stephen in self-defense to protect herself from his aggression. A year after Stephen's death, Mary Catherine's trial began, revealing the tumultuous nature of their relationship. Her defense team argued that she acted in self-defense, citing Stephen's history of aggressive and abusive behavior as justification for her actions. To support their claim, they presented evidence to the jury that demonstrated Stephen's controlling, manipulative, and dangerous nature, which had led Mary Catherine to fear for her safety. Mary Catherine testified tearfully about years of abuse by Stephen, recounting a disturbing pattern of physical, mental, emotional, verbal, and sexual mistreatment. She described his attacks, belittling, and disregard for her humanity, saying his abuse knew no bounds, leaving her trapped and terrified. Mary Catherine's defense presented a text from Stephen, saying he'd punish her when he got home. Mary Catherine testified that meant physical abuse, and if she defended herself, he'd hit her harder. Another text shown in court read, "Don't hit me, or I'll hit you back 2 times harder." Mary Catherine testified that Stephen had a red room, like in 50 Shades of Grey, where they had aggressive and violent sex. She provided a text from Stephen saying, "You're going to the red room," to back her claim. Mary Catherine also alleged Stephen assaulted her twice, once after a Disney World trip, saying she felt uncomfortable with their increasingly aggressive sex and asked him to stop. But he intensified his efforts, claiming she owed him for gifts. The defense presented text messages from Stephen to support Mary Catherine's abuse claims. These messages were vulgar, threatening, and showed a pattern of verbal assaults. Over 60 pages of messages showcased Stephen's abuse, including one disturbing message where he held a dead fish, captioned, "This is you." Another message presented to the court was one from Stephen after Mary Catherine cheated on him, in which he wrote that he was going to wreck her for wrecking him. Furthermore, the defense alleged that Stephen had a drug and alcohol addiction that contributed to his violent outbursts. Mary Catherine said she broke up with Stephen, not the other way around. She claimed he got angry and threatened her, so she grabbed a gun in self-defense. Her last words to him before firing were, "Get out of my house." Stephen's friends and family disputed Mary Catherine's claims that he was violent and abusive, knowing him as friendly and caring. His mom denied knowledge of disturbing texts and threats, but claimed he only said hurtful things out of anger. Mary Catherine was questioned about not reporting Stephen's alleged abuse. The state also pointed out she searched for violent, explicit images online hours before the shooting, claiming she did it to please Stephen. The state argued she'd changed her story about the shooting at least 10 times since her initial interview. Evidence in court included a text from Stephen to Mary Catherine, saying she'd previously pointed a gun at him, and his friends testified about witnessing her abuse towards him, supporting the state's claim that she was violent towards him, not the other way around. Jurors deliberated for 4 hours before acquitting Mary Catherine of malice murder, felony murder, and lesser charges. Shocked family and friends expected a guilty verdict, but jurors later revealed they believed Mary Catherine intentionally killed Stephen. However, they couldn't prove it beyond a reasonable doubt due to lack of evidence, making it hard to distinguish murder from self-defense. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Laci Peterson. Laci Rocha was born on May 4, 1975, to Sharon and Dennis Rocha. When Laci and her older brother Brent were still young, their parents got divorced. After the divorce, Laci's mother married Ron, a dairy farmer, who became a significant father figure in her life. Ron helped raise Laci and played an important role in her upbringing. With her cheerful and outgoing personality, Laci was known for her bright smile and bubbly nature. She loved talking to people and was always eager to engage in conversations, which made her a natural attention seeker. She thrived in social situations and was very popular. Growing up on a dairy farm with her stepfather, Laci developed a strong connection with nature. She spent a lot of time exploring and enjoying the outdoors. One of her favorite activities was gardening with her mother, which brought them both a lot of joy and fulfillment. As a teenager, Laci attended Thomas Downey High School and was a cheerleader. Her outgoing and bubbly personality made her a perfect fit for this role. She became very popular at school and made a lasting impression as the ideal cheerleader. After graduating from high school, Laci went on to attend California Polytechnic University, where she studied ornamental horticulture. Her passion for plants and wildlife inspired her to specialize in this field. While at Cal Poly, Laci regularly visited her friend who worked at a restaurant in Morro Bay. That's where she met Scott Peterson, a co-worker of her friend. Laci was instantly attracted to Scott and soon found herself smitten. She decided to take the initiative and gave him her phone number. Scott quickly got in touch with Laci, and they instantly clicked during their first conversation. After some anticipation, Scott asked Laci out on their first date, a deep-sea fishing trip. Unfortunately, Laci got seasick during the outing. Despite the unfortunate start, Laci and Scott continued seeing each other, and their relationship became more serious over time. They eventually decided to live together. Before meeting Laci, Scott had ambitions of becoming a professional golfer, but as their relationship progressed, his priorities changed, and he opted to focus on a business career instead. In 1997, Laci graduated from California Polytechnic State University, followed by Scott's graduation the next year. This marked a significant turning point in their lives, filled with promise and potential. On August 9, 1997, the couple exchanged their wedding vows in Avila Valley, San Luis Obispo County, surrounded by a picturesque resort setting. They celebrated their love and commitment to each other. After getting married, Laci and Scott launched a new business venture by opening The Shack, a sports bar in San Luis Obispo, California. Although business was initially slow, the couple eventually saw a steady increase in customers, with weekends often being particularly busy. After several successful years, in 2000, Laci and Scott made the difficult decision to sell The Shack. Despite the bar providing a steady income, they decided it was time to explore new opportunities. Following careful consideration, they finalized the sale and relocated to Laci's hometown of Modesto, California. In Modesto, Laci and Scott bought a beautiful 3-bedroom, 2-bath home in a high-end neighborhood. Laci took on a part-time job as a substitute teacher, while Scott worked for a European fertilizer company. As a devoted and dedicated partner, Laci focused her time and energy on being the best wife possible for Scott, mastering cooking, cleaning, and being attentive, ensuring their home was always warm and welcoming. In 2002, the couple received wonderful news. They were expecting a baby. The due date was set for February 10, 2003, not 2023. Upon learning the baby's gender, they happily announced that Laci and Scott were having a boy. They finally chose the name Connor for their little bundle of joy on December 24, 2002. Scott said he left the house at 9:30 a.m. to go fishing at the Berkeley Marina. At that time, Lossie had a lot of things planned, according to Scott. She was watching Martha Stewart on TV, getting ready to clean the floor, bake Christmas cookies, and walk their golden retriever Mackenzie at the park. However, around 10:30 a.m., one of their neighbors found Mackenzie wandering around outside their home. The neighbor took Mackenzie back to Scott and Lacey's house and left her in the backyard. When Scott got back home that afternoon from fishing, he said the house was empty. Mackenzie was in the yard, but there was no sign of Lacey. Her car was still parked in the driveway. Scott claimed that after he got home, he took a shower and washed his clothes, which had gotten dirty and wet from fishing. After Scott finished his shower on Christmas Eve, he realized Lacey was missing. As he grew more worried, he decided to call Lossie's mother and stepfather, Sharon and Ron. Unfortunately, neither of them had heard from Lacey all day, and they were getting worried about her safety too. As time passed and Lossie remained missing, Scott and Sharon decided to report her disappearance to the police around 6 p.m. They stressed to the police the urgency of finding Lossie, given her 7-month pregnancy with their baby Connor. During questioning, the police asked Scott about his whereabouts and activities on the day his wife vanished. According to Scott, he went fishing at the Berkeley Marina, approximately 90 miles from their Modesto home. However, the police would later reveal that they suspected foul play in Lossie's disappearance from the start of their investigation. Initially, the police did not treat Lossie's case as suspicious, despite the family's concerns. As the search for Lossie continued, her family publicly defended Scott. To outsiders, Scott and Lossie appeared to be an ideal couple, making it difficult to imagine Scott capable of harming his pregnant wife. As the investigation into Lossie's disappearance continued, the police became increasingly suspicious of Scott. Almost a month after Lossie vanished, the police made a startling discovery about Scott Peterson. Their investigation revealed that he had had 2 extramarital affairs and a long-term relationship with a woman named Amber Fry while still married to Lossie. Amber Fry got in touch with the police on December 30th, 2002, after finding out that Scott was a suspect in his wife's disappearance. She informed the police that she had been having an affair with Scott, who initially presented himself as a single man when they first met on November 20th, 2002. However, 2 weeks prior to Lossie's disappearance, Scott confessed to Amber that he was a widower and that this Christmas would be his first one without his wife, which was a different story from what he initially told her. The police were shocked by this information and began to suspect that Scott may have already decided to murder his pregnant wife. To gather evidence against Scott, the police asked Amber to make a recorded phone call to him, hoping to capture a confession on tape. The police informed Lossie's family about Scott's infidelity. It was not until they showed her a picture of Scott with Amber that Lossie's mother, Sharon, finally accepted Scott's guilt in Lossie's murder. Lacey's family stopped supporting Scott in the search for her after learning of his affairs. The massive search effort involved multiple resources and over 900 volunteers. At a press conference, a police officer doubted she left voluntarily on December 24th. The media frenzy focused on the story of a devoted wife and daughter vanishing on Christmas Eve. After Lossie disappeared on December 24, 2002, a $25,000 reward was initially offered for information leading to her safe return. As time passed with no leads, the reward was increased to $500,000 to raise awareness and gather more information. Posters of Lossie were displayed prominently in Modesto, California, and a website was created by one of her friend's husbands to spread the news. Months later, on April 13, 2003, a couple walking their dog in the Richmond's Point Isabel Regional Shoreline Park made a horrifying discovery. They found the decomposing body of a male infant. The next day, another person found the body of a pregnant woman on the east side of the Bay Shore, about a mile away from where the baby was found. On April 18, 2003, DNA tests confirmed that the bodies were indeed Lossie and her unborn son, Connor. Lossie and Connor were laid to rest at Wood Cemetery. The Associated Press later discovered that the autopsy revealed disturbing details about Lossie's body. She had suffered 2 cracked ribs, her upper torso had been emptied of internal organs, and her head and limbs were missing. The medical examiner concluded that the baby had died while still in Lossie's womb and was expelled after her death. Furthermore, the autopsy found 1.5 loops of nylon tape around the baby's neck and a significant cut on its body. To investigate Lossie's disappearance, agents from the FBI and the Modesto Police Department searched the residence of Scott and Lacey. They discovered several intriguing clues, including a piece of hair found in Scott's pliers on his fishing boat. A DNA sample from the hair matched Lacey. In addition to searching their home, the FBI thoroughly examined Scott's truck and warehouse, looking for any potential evidence linking him to Lossie's disappearance. They also searched Scott's boat, where they found a homemade anchor. Scott claimed he made the anchor using a 90-pound bag of concrete to repair his driveway. However, the state believed that Scott had made 5 anchors, using 4 of them to weigh down Lossie's body in the San Francisco Bay. Lossie and her baby son Connor's bodies were found in San Francisco Bay. After this, Scott was arrested near a golf course. Notably, Scott's hair was bleached blonde, and his car was packed with $115,000, survival gear, camping equipment, 4 cell phones, and 2 driver's licenses. This evidence suggested he was preparing to flee, but his father claimed the license was borrowed to get a golf course discount, and the packed car was due to media scrutiny. Scott's trial started a year after his arrest in June 2004. In their opening arguments, the prosecution presented its case to the jury, claiming that they had evidence Scott murdered Lossie because of his affair with Amber Frey. The prosecution highlighted Scott's suspicious behavior in the days leading up to and following Lossie's disappearance, pointing out inconsistencies in his initial police statement. At first, Scott told police he was fishing, but later told others he was golfing. The prosecution also emphasized Scott's request to police about whether they had used cadaver dogs to search a park where Lossie walked their dog, suggesting he was aware of a potential crime scene and trying to cover his tracks. In response, Scott's defense attorneys presented a strong counter-argument. They argued that just because Scott had a history of infidelity, it didn't necessarily make him guilty of Lossie's murder. They claimed it was unlikely Scott would risk everything for someone he had only gone on 4 dates with. The defense also proposed that Lossie's hair could have been found in Scott's boat due to a previous visit to the marina with him. During Scott's trial, 2 relatives of Lossie's provided testimony and reported that Scott displayed no emotional response during the period when his pregnant wife was missing. A real estate agent also testified, stating that Scott approached her in January, 1 month after Lossie's disappearance, attempting to sell the couple's home. Furthermore, a car salesman testified that Scott traded in Lossie's vehicle after she vanished. The state regarded all of this as evidence of Scott's guilt. Amber Frey took the witness stand and discussed her affair with Scott. The jury listened to secretly recorded phone calls between Amber and Scott, including one made after Lossie's disappearance in which Scott falsely claimed to be in Paris, when in actuality he was attending a vigil for his missing wife. A hydrologist testified that Lossie's body could have been dumped where Scott claimed to be fishing. The defense argued there was no credible evidence linking Scott to the crime, suggesting someone kidnapped Lossie, held her until she gave birth, then dumped both bodies in the bay. During Scott's trial, a juror was dismissed and replaced with an alternate due to misconduct. This juror had conducted unauthorized research on the case, violating legal procedures. Furthermore, the foreman also requested to be removed from the case, citing concerns about maintaining a fair and just trial. On November 12, 2004, a California jury found Scott guilty of 2 counts of murder. Specifically, he was convicted of first-degree murder for the killing of his wife Lossie and second-degree murder for the killing of their unborn son Connor. Notably, Lassie's murder was classified as first-degree murder with special circumstances due to the involvement of the fetus, making Scott eligible for the death penalty. After Scott's conviction for the murders, the trial entered its penalty phase, which focused on determining the appropriate punishment. The jury had to consider various factors, including Scott's criminal history, any circumstances that might increase his punishment, aggravating circumstances, and any circumstances that might reduce it, mitigating circumstances. The jury unanimously agreed that Scott should receive the death penalty. Following the jury's verdict, the judge reviewed the evidence and confirmed their decision. He noted that Lassie's murder was particularly cruel, uncaring, heartless, and callous, which justified the death penalty. As is automatic in such cases, Scott's sentence was appealed, and his case was subsequently heard by the California Supreme Court in June 2020. During the appeal, Scott's defense team raised several arguments. They claimed that some potential jurors were improperly dismissed, that the trial judge should not have allowed 2 jurors to visit Scott's boat, and that the trial should have been moved to a different county due to concerns that many potential jurors had already made up their minds about Scott's guilt before the trial began. However, the state countered that there was no evidence to suggest any jurors were unfairly dismissed, and that none of the 12 jurors who decided Scott's fate had shown any bias. In August 2020, the U.S. Supreme Court upheld Scott's conviction but overturned his death sentence. In 2021, the judge resentenced Scott to life imprisonment without parole. Consequently, Scott was moved from San Quentin State Prison, where he had been on death row, to Mule Creek State Prison in Ione, California, as per the judge's order. President George W. Bush signed the Unborn Victims of Violence Act in 2004, with Lassie's family present. The law, also known as Lassie and Connor's Law, protects unborn children from violence, recognizing them as separate legal entities from their mothers, and making it a crime to harm or kill them. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Anna Repkina. On April 17, 2017, a caretaker named Russell found a dead body in the Oregon forest. The woman was Anna Repkina, a Russian native who had been shot in the head and had various trash around her body. Russell reported the discovery to the police. Anna Alexieva Repkina, from Chelyabinsk, Russia, came from a respectable family. She was intelligent, hardworking, and had a passion for travel, rock music, cats, and capturing memories through photography. Anna valued love and longed to be loved in return. She aspired to get married, have children, and build a family home. Those who knew her still cherished the memory of her infectious sense of humor, which made her a joy to be around. In 2016, Anna's 7-year relationship with her high school sweetheart came to an end, leaving her heartbroken. However, she refused to give up on her dreams of finding true love. With online dating becoming increasingly popular, Anna decided to take a chance and signed up for several websites. It was on a Russian dating site that she matched with someone who seemed to fit her ideal perfectly. His name was William Hargrove, a 26-year-old from Oregon who worked as a bouncer and mechanic. Interestingly, William had a strong affinity for Russian culture, and he claimed to have fallen for Anna as well. William treated Anna with kindness, frequently praising her. Despite being physically distant, he made an effort to be emotionally present when she needed him. His friends described him as a charismatic, passionate, and likable individual with a great sense of humor. He was a driven person who inspired those around him to pursue their goals. According to his former roommate, William had a remarkable ability to talk his way in or out of any situation. Anna and William communicated daily, and their online relationship rapidly became serious over a few months. They seemed destined to be together, sharing a deep connection. Their common interests, such as enjoying live music and having a similar sense of humor, made them a perfect match, as observed by their friends. Anna and William were very compatible. William was extremely sweet. Despite being separated by continents, he would frequently send her flowers. Soon, they started discussing meeting in person. In December 2016, they decided to take their months-old relationship to the next level. Anna booked a flight to Oregon to see William. However, Anna made a mistake on her first attempt. She accidentally booked a ticket for Portland, Maine, instead of Portland, Oregon. By the time she realized her error, she had already flown to Maine. Still, she was determined to spend the Christmas holidays with her boyfriend. She corrected her flight issues and arrived in Oregon on time. William picked her up from the airport. Anna and William shared 10 wonderful days together. He took her on guided tours, and they explored the seaside, played in the snow, and snuggled up by the fireplace. He introduced her to his friends, making their time together even more special. As the clock struck midnight on New Year's Eve, they joyfully shouted, "Happy New Year," and shared a romantic kiss. For both of them, it was the perfect Christmas, and they both felt they were meant to be together. After Anna's 10-day visit came to an end, William proposed to her with his grandmother's emerald ring, and she happily accepted. From that moment on, the two were engaged. However, what Anna was unaware of was that William had been unfaithful to her. He had been secretly involved with Michelle Chavez, his 33-year-old landlady, who was already married with 2 children. William had been renting a room in Michelle's home, and their affair had been ongoing for over a year, even before Anna's visit. In reality, Anna had unknowingly met Michelle, who was posing as William's landlady, and was in fact William's romantic rival. Michelle was aware that her boyfriend William had brought his girlfriend Anna to her home. She didn't confront them, possibly thinking that William would never leave her or that Anna was insignificant, just like her own husband. Whatever her reason, she kept quiet. However, things became clearer when Michelle discovered the engagement ring. Anna, thrilled with the news, posted a picture of her ring on Facebook. The post appeared on Michelle's homepage, thanks to the algorithm. Michelle was furious, not just because William was engaged to another woman, but because she had planned to leave her husband for him. In a bold move, Michelle took off her wedding ring and handed it to William. The ring was identical to Anna's engagement ring. It was the same one William had recycled. Michelle expressed her anger to William, who repeatedly assured her that Anna meant nothing to him and that he would break off the engagement on March 1st, 2017. Meanwhile, Anna returned to Oregon, preparation in full swing. She had packed her wedding dress in a suitcase and had even resigned from her job, ready to start a new life with her fiancé, William. Michelle grew concerned about the seriousness of Anna and William's relationship, so she decided to intervene. One day, she reached out to Anna on Facebook and revealed everything that had been going on. Anna then reported back to William about the conversation with Michelle. However, William dismissed Michelle's concerns, attributing them to jealousy as his ex. Despite this, the couple was determined to move forward with their plans, ignoring Michelle's warnings. They proceeded to schedule their wedding for March 23rd, planning to exchange vows by the seaside. Anna wore the wedding dress she had brought from Russia, and they headed to the beach for the ceremony. However, the officiant failed to show up. After waiting for what felt like an eternity, they returned home, deciding to try again in April. William consistently made it clear to Anna that she was insignificant to him and that he didn't love her. However, Anna refused to accept this. Michelle grew tired of the situation and decided to intervene. On April 15th, Michelle gave William an ultimatum. He had to choose between her and Anna. He couldn't continue to lead both women on. Michelle also issued a stark warning. If Anna wasn't gone by April 20th, she would take drastic action. Building a snowman was a sinister euphemism for killing someone and hiding their body in a location where it would remain frozen and undiscovered. After Michelle clearly expressed her feelings to William, she was unable to reach him. She assumed he had chosen Anna over her. The next day, Sunday the 16th of April, Michelle left voicemails for William in an attempt to convey her emotions. However, William called Michelle to inform her that he was single again, having ended his relationship with Anna. The breakup was messy. but Anna was in the process of returning to Russia. As it happened, William's car had collided with a deer, leaving him stranded at the Ali Murtal store. He asked Michelle to meet him there, which she agreed to, despite being in the middle of a family gathering on Easter Sunday. Michelle left her family's house and drove to the store, where she and William reconnected. They celebrated their rekindled relationship by having sex in William's car on the 17th of April. Anna's body was discovered in the forest at the start of the investigation into her death. The investigators had no idea who she was, as there was no identification on her, and she had only been in the state for about a month. There was no sign of a murder weapon, only litter scattered around her. However, among the trash, a clear plastic bag caught their attention, containing a KFC receipt, an empty Pepsi cup, and a KFC chicken bag. The KFC receipt was the crucial piece of evidence, bearing a date, time, and debit card number. The debit card was traced back to Kevin Thomas, who was subsequently tracked down by the investigators. Kevin revealed that he and William had a weekly habit of getting lunch at KFC every Friday, and the receipt was from a purchase about a week before his questioning. Kevin had been the one to expose William's complicated romantic relationships. The investigation into Anna's death was the only reason William's infidelity had ever come to light. Kevin also recalled that William had borrowed his shotgun, claiming he wanted to go to the woods to blow off some steam. After obtaining Kevin's statement, the police shifted their focus to William and Michelle. William's behavior became increasingly suspicious, as he was caught on camera in stores where he had purchased cigars and Star Wars Legos. He even confided in Kevin that he was splurging on things he couldn't afford in an attempt to lift his spirits. On the 16th, William broke down in tears in the arms of a store employee, claiming his girlfriend had just dumped him. However, William had actually moved back in with Michelle, and when questioned by the police about his whereabouts on the 16th of April, he falsely stated that he had gone for a drive with Michelle. When asked about his relationship with Anna, William denied any romance, saying he had met her in Corvallis while out walking, went on 2 dates, but realized it wouldn't work out between them, which ended things between them. William said the last time he saw Anna was in mid-March. He also mentioned that Anna had mistakenly posted about their engagement on Facebook, which caused trouble for him with his actual partner, Michelle. William was questioned about trash near his late fiancée, Anna Rapina's body. He confessed to littering, but claimed he'd thrown KFC trash away 40 miles from the scene. Investigators were skeptical. When told his trash was found near another murder victim, William was shocked, then asked for a lawyer. He was arrested April 19th for Anna's murder. Michelle was questioned after William's arrest. Initially, she stuck to their rehearsed story, saying they spent the day together. However, under continued questioning, she admitted lying and gave a new account, claiming William was supposed to call and pick her up, but never did. Later, when Michelle was being questioned by the police, they told her that her boyfriend of a year and a half was being held in custody on suspicion of murder. Her response was a simple, "Okay." The investigator found this reaction suspicious and highlighted it, which caused Michelle's emotions to become visible. She started to whimper and attributed her initial lack of reaction to being in a state of shock. William Hargrove was facing trial in October 2019 for murder, identity theft, and 2 counts of theft, charges that were filed in June 2018. The prosecution sought to have William convicted on all counts, while the defense argued that he was innocent and that Melissa, his burnt lover, was the actual perpetrator. However, the prosecution presented strong evidence against William, highlighting his motive and guilt. It was revealed that William had a second lover, Michelle, who was pressuring him to choose between her and Anna. Furthermore, evidence showed that William had driven with Anna, and his cell phone records placed him near the scene of the crime on the day of her murder, at 4:30 p.m. on Logging Road. The shotgun used to kill Anna was found in William's car, with only his fingerprints on the weapon. Moreover, despite claiming to have no involvement in Anna's death, William was caught using her money to pay off his car insurance, make ATM withdrawals, and go shopping. The prosecution alleged that William had taken Anna to the forest, shot and killed her, and then used her money to pay off his debts, all because he was choosing between Anna and Michelle. The defense argued that their client was innocent and pointed to Melissa as the prime suspect. According to them, Melissa had motives to harm Anna, having previously threatened to build a snowman with her. Furthermore, Melissa's cell phone had been found on the logging road just weeks before Anna's murder, suggesting she had likely been in the area to plan the crime. When searched, Melissa's house yielded Anna's cell phone, which implicated her further. Despite this, Melissa was not charged with any crimes and was called as a witness for the prosecution. Melissa took the stand to testify about her relationships, including how she met William and the dynamics between them. As a late-night cab driver, she had met William at the bar where he worked. With her husband's knowledge and consent, she started an affair with William, which grew intense over time. Eventually, William even rented a room in her house to be closer to her. Both her marriage and her relationship with William were open, meaning they allowed each other to have outside relationships. When Anna first appeared, Melissa wasn't interested. However, by Anna's second visit, which seemed like it would be a long-term stay, Melissa was upset, particularly after seeing her own wedding ring on Anna's finger. Although Melissa had given William an ultimatum, she was not involved in his harming Anna. She claimed she never intended for Anna to get hurt or worse, lose her life. Melissa continued to defend herself against the defense's allegations. The threat about building a snowman was a joke, albeit an extreme one, which was a family joke. Her cell phone was indeed found in the forest, but William had driven her there. She had no idea why he did so or what he was planning. Furthermore, William had given her Anna's cell phone the day before he was questioned by the authorities. Melissa's testimony lasted for 14 hours. Besides Melissa, around 70 other people gave testimony, including Anna's mother, William's best friend and roommate, as well as some of Melissa's family members. In her hometown in Oregon, Melissa faced intense scrutiny, with locals criticizing and bullying her. At one point, she even attempted to take her own life, but fortunately, it was unsuccessful. Prosecutor praised Melissa's efforts, calling them tough, super tough. After a month of court appearances, the judge asked the jury to deliver a verdict. They deliberated for under 3 hours, finding no evidence linking Michelle to Anna's death, unlike William, and clearing her alibi. William maintained his not guilty plea, but the overwhelming evidence proved conclusive, and he was found guilty on all counts, receiving a life sentence with the possibility of parole after 25 years. His attorney, however, announced plans to file an appeal. The jurors in Anna's case developed a strong bond during the trial. After the verdict, they were escorted to the logging trail, the site where Anna's body was found, to pay their respects. Anna will be remembered as a brave young woman who left her Russian homeland to build a new life in the United States. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Paige Bergfeld. Paige Bergfeld was born in Atlanta, Georgia on April 27, 1973, to Frank and Suzanne Bergfeld. She had one sibling, Craig Bergfeld. Paige grew up in Atlanta before relocating to Colorado. In 1995, she married her high school crush, Howard Ron Beegler, who was also her first love. However, their marriage ended due to disagreements about having children. While Paige was ready to start a family, Howard was not interested. Following their divorce, Paige married Rob Dixon, an ambitious businessman, in 1998. Their intense 10-year marriage resulted in 3 children, Jess, Taft, and Cole. June 28, 2007, marked the last time Paige Bergfeld was seen by her loved ones. Earlier that day, Paige had spent part of the afternoon with her ex-husband, Howard Beegler, with whom she had recently rekindled their romance. After a picnic together, they went their separate ways. Around 9 p.m., Beegler called Paige to check in on her, and she assured him she was heading home and would text him once she arrived. However, that text never came. Beegler tried calling her again the next day, but her phone went straight to voicemail, indicating it was either turned off or out of reach. This raised his concerns, and on the third day, he decided to visit her apartment. What he discovered was shocking. Paige's live-in nanny informed him that she had not returned home in 3 days. Beegler immediately alerted Paige's parents and the authorities, sparking a terrifying investigation that would unfold in the days to come. Paige Bergfeld's parents, Frank and Suzanne, were devastated when their beloved daughter went missing. The police suspected foul play in her disappearance, partly because of her parents. Frank described Paige as a devoted mother who would never leave her children. Paige would go to great lengths to care for her kids, even if it meant crawling with broken limbs. Her children were her top priority, and everyone close to her knew it. Paige's brother, Craig Bergfeld, a Seattle-based plastic surgeon specializing in facial reconstruction for kids, left his home to care for Paige's children in Grand Junction, Colorado. He and his wife Claire understood that Paige's primary concern was her kids' safety and well-being, and they made that their top priority too. Seeing that Paige was a devoted and caring mother, the police were convinced that she wouldn't have simply abandoned her children and left town. They believed something must be preventing Paige from being with her kids, and they launched an investigation to uncover the truth. Mesa County Sheriff Matt Hilke began looking into the case, following standard procedure when someone goes missing. Typically, the closest people to the missing person and the last ones to see them are the first to be investigated. So the police invited Howard Beegler for questioning. Beegler was the last person to see Paige before she vanished, raising the question of whether he could have been involved in her disappearance. In an interview, Paige's father confirmed that Ron Beegler was Paige's greatest love. Paige and Ron had shared a passionate romance since high school, and after reuniting over 10 years ago, her father was certain that Beegler would never harm his daughter. Paige Bergfeld's life took a surprising turn. After marrying Rob Dixon in 1998, she fell for his charming personality. However, her father described their pre-marriage relationship as whirlwind-like. Rob's wealth from a successful business initially impressed Paige, but his post-marriage behavior became reckless, marked by extravagant spending and poor investments, ultimately leading to financial ruin. Paige took steps to improve their financial situation by starting a small preschool dance program called Brain Dance. She also began selling kitchen appliances for a company called The Pampered Chef from their home. However, Rob's spending habits canceled out Paige's efforts, causing tension in their marriage. Frank Bergfeld described Rob's unpredictable personality. While Rob could be cheerful, friendly, and lively at times, he would often become mean, condescending, irritable, and short-tempered. Rob Dixon's importance in the police investigation grew after a new discovery. Prior to her divorce, Paige had reported a threat to the police in October 2004. In a 911 call, she said Rob had threatened to kill the kids if she didn't let them stay with him, but the situation was resolved by the time police arrived. A year after the first incident, Paige Bergfeld reported another disturbing altercation to 911. She and her husband Rob had a fight, during which he pushed her to the ground while she was holding their baby, and then punched her in the stomach. This time, the police arrested Rob, but he was released after completing an anger management course. The Mesa County Sheriff's Office questioned Rob Dixon about Paige's disappearance. Rob claimed to have been in Philadelphia on the day she went missing, which was supported by the fact that he had moved there after their divorce. Despite his history of violent behavior towards Paige, Rob had a solid alibi, having been 2,000 miles away from Grand Junction at the time of her disappearance. The police did not release details of their interview with Rob to the public. Paige's father, Frank Bergfeld, realized that even someone with a troubled personality like Rob couldn't have committed murder from such a distance. Although Rob was no longer a suspect, the Bergfeld family still had concerns about him. 3 months prior to her disappearance, Paige posted disturbing content about Rob on an online message board, where she shared that her children would often ask her if their father was going to kill her. In the post, she confided that she could imagine her kids wondering what life would be like if she were actually dead. With both of Paige's ex-husbands possessing solid alibis, the police were forced to broaden their suspect search. However, after investigating those close to Paige Bergfeld, the police were still unable to find a suspect, leaving them to ponder who could be responsible for her disappearance. Ultimately, this led to a stunning revelation about Paige Bergfeld herself. Paige Bergfeld was a devoted mother with a bubbly personality, loved by her family and friends. But behind her happy family scenes, she led a secret, double life. In addition to her public roles as a dance teacher and kitchen appliances vendor in Grand Junction, Paige had a hidden online persona. After her disappearance, her family discovered something suspicious on her laptop, which they reported to the police. The subsequent investigation revealed that Paige had a second, lucrative source of income as an expensive escort. Paige used the alias Carrie online and advertised services that went beyond those of a traditional escort, including nude massages and topless encounters, as suggested by provocative internet ads. Paige's family, particularly her sister-in-law Carrie Bergfeld, were shocked to discover her secret life after her disappearance. Although her family was surprised to learn that Paige worked as an escort, they seemed to understand her reasons for doing so. Paige's love for her children drove her to take on a huge responsibility as the breadwinner and provider of her family after her divorce. Her father, Frank Bergfeld, believed that this led her to make a difficult choice. Raising 3 kids alone was a massive task, and Paige was determined to give them the best life possible. Paige's parents, Frank and Susanna Bergfeld, were surprised by the way she chose to achieve her goals. In an interview, Frank said he wished Paige had talked to him about her plans, as he would have been happy to advise her about the potential risks. Although they didn't agree with her profession, Frank and Susanna continued to love and be proud of their daughter without reserve. Craig Bergfeld, Paige's brother, shared their father's view that Paige's profession was driven by her desire to provide for her children. He was aware that her dance school and kitchen appliance sales weren't lucrative enough to cover her $6,000 monthly mortgage, let alone put clothes on the backs of 3 kids. Although he suspected she had another source of income, he never imagined she would be working as an escort. Paige's ex filed for bankruptcy after their divorce. Her brother Craig thought she'd default on the large mortgage soon. But Paige surprised him and his wife C by buying her first home with her 2 jobs teaching dance and selling kitchen equipment. C questioned Paige about her income, and Paige confessed to having worked as a stripper before her marriage. At the age of 21, Paige resided in Dearborn and was employed at the Mile High Saloon, where she earned a substantial income of approximately $400,000 monthly. According to Paige, she ceased working as a stripper upon getting married, though it appears she didn't entirely disconnect from the industry. C surmised that Paige's prior experience as a stripper likely influenced her decision to become an escort. Mesa County prosecutor D.A. Pete Hinger revealed that, despite 20 years of experience, he had never come across a case like Paige's. He found it astonishing that someone from her socioeconomic background and with her family dynamics would be involved in such a profession. Hinger acknowledged that Paige Bergfeld embodied the ideal of a responsible and devoted mother, making her double life a stunning revelation. This discovery triggered a more in-depth investigation. Paige's parents recognized that uncovering her secrets would be crucial in determining her fate. However, as much as they yearned for closure, they were uncertain if they truly wanted to know the truth. Fluky's search team made progress, but it unsettled the Bergfeld family. Craig wasn't ready to find out what had happened to his sister, clinging to hope she was still alive. Police suspected she wouldn't return, believing it tied to her secret job. The chief district attorney, Dan Rubenstein, took charge of Paige Bergfeld's case and identified a suspect, Lester Ralph Jones, a middle-aged client of Paige's escort services. Although Rubenstein was convinced that Jones was involved in Paige's disappearance, he lacked concrete evidence without her body. A major breakthrough occurred in 2012 when a hiker discovered a body. At first, the police department wasn't certain the body found was Paige's, but after conducting necessary tests, they confirmed it was her by matching her teeth and jaw. What was surprising, however, was that Paige's body had been lying in the exact spot a hiker stumbled upon it, an area already thoroughly searched by Connie Fluke's team, yet nobody had found her. The investigators theorized that the killer must have buried Paige in a grave deep enough to evade the search party. With sufficient evidence, Don Rubenstein was able to bring in Lester Ralph Jones for questioning. Although the police couldn't determine the exact cause of Paige Bergfeld's death, they were convinced it was a violent one. Paige had suffered a fractured jaw, leading investigators to believe her attacker must have severely beaten her. Additionally, remnants of duct tape were found around the corners of her mouth, and it appeared her jaw was fractured just before her death. This discovery made the items found during the search, which Connie Fluke had organized, understandable. The items included pieces of documents scattered along the highway, some of which had Paige's name, while others had her children's names. The investigators assumed that the documents must have been thrown out of the car by Paige's kidnapper as he drove her to the spot where he eventually killed her. However, another possibility was that Paige herself had thrown the documents out of the car as a way of helping people to locate her. Unfortunately, Paige's killer, Lester Ralph Jones, was able to roam free for 5 years after her terrifying murder. Given his bad reputation, it was easy to believe that he was responsible for Paige Bergfeld's death. Don Rubenstein gathered sufficient evidence against Lester Ralph Jones during the investigation. The police discovered Paige's car on the highway, burned in a fire that was believed to have been intentionally started in the passenger seat, likely to destroy DNA samples or any incriminating evidence. Notably, the driver's seat had been adjusted to fit a taller person. Although Ralph Jones denied any knowledge of Paige's burned car during interrogation, it was found just a short distance from his workshop. Given his criminal history, including a prior felony conviction, Ralph Jones's testimony was not credible. Furthermore, a critical piece of evidence implicated him. He had contacted Paige Bergfeld using a burner phone on the day of her disappearance. Despite his denial of purchasing the phone, a CCTV recording showed him doing so. Ralph Jones frequently used Paige's escort services, unaware that he was a ruthless killer. However, it was a conversation with local Sheriff Sergeant Art Smith that ultimately led to his downfall. The sheriff had confiscated 2 of Jones's vehicles, prompting an unexpected and shocking response from Ralph. His reaction was that of a man consumed by guilt. When Sergeant Smith inquired about the cars, Jones casually asked where he would bury a body. This cryptic comment, combined with other evidence, provided the crucial breakthrough the police needed. 7 years after Paige Bergfeld's disappearance, in November 2014, Lester Ralph Jones was arrested and charged with first-degree murder and kidnapping. According to the arresting officers, Jones had been expecting the arrest and showed no signs of surprise. He did not ask any questions, instead calmly turning around and placing his hands behind his back. His bail was set at $2 million. In 2016, Ralph Jones stood trial, and the jury determined that although the evidence against him was circumstantial, it was sufficient to convict him. 9 years after Paige vanished, the jury delivered a guilty verdict in December 2016, finding Ralph Jones responsible for her murder and kidnapping, and he received a life sentence. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Nicole Laub. Around 5 p.m. on August 19, 2014, a man called Portland's Emergency Services in Oregon, USA, to report a woman who had been stabbed in the chest. The victim was still alive but struggling to breathe, so the caller urged the operator to send an ambulance to the Timber Creek apartments as quickly as possible. As police officers rushed to the scene, they had no idea that the victim's final words would hold the key to cracking the case. The victim, later identified as Nicole Laub, had been receiving assistance from the couple living at the crime scene when paramedics arrived. Despite their best efforts, Nicole sadly succumbed to her injuries, but not before uttering a crucial phrase. The detectives spoke with the 911 caller, who provided a more detailed account of what had occurred. While walking down the stairs of the apartment building towards the parking lot with his wife, the man heard a scream. He turned to his right and saw a woman running towards them, shouting, "He stabbed me! He stabbed me!" The woman explained to the couple that she did not know her attacker, but was able to describe him as wearing camo pants and a black hoodie. The manager of the Timber Creek apartments identified a 29-year-old colleague, Nicole Laub, as the victim. She had been working as a leasing consultant at the complex for a few weeks. On August 19th, as part of her duties, Nicole drove a golf cart around the complex to deliver lease renewal letters to residents. Each applicable resident also received a balloon tied to a package of popcorn. Based on Nicole's notes and the map found in the golf cart, detectives pinpointed the likely location of the attack to a specific stairwell breezeway at Timber Creek. They also discovered several pieces of evidence that supported this theory, including a trail of blood droplets leading from the stairwell and leaflets scattered at the foot of the stairs. During the investigation led by the Washington County Sheriff's Office, multiple witnesses came forward reporting a suspicious individual, described as a young male wearing a black hoodie and camel-colored pants, seen in the vicinity of Timber Creek around the time of the attack. By analyzing the reports and timelines of each sighting, detectives were able to reconstruct the path the suspect took to enter and exit Timber Creek. Over 20 law enforcement officers, aided by K-9 units, conducted an intensive search. The Washington County Search and Rescue Team focused on the wooded areas surrounding Cedar Mill Creek, which flows through the Timber Creek apartment complex. During the search, several items were found and sent to the lab for analysis to determine their potential evidentiary value. While the detectives did not reveal the specifics of their discoveries, they stated that they were exploring every possible scenario. The investigators were working to determine the motive behind the brazen daylight attack in an apartment complex home to over 1,000 residents. They informed Chris Laub, Nicole's husband, about the incident. Nicole already had a daughter when she met Chris, who had 2 daughters from previous relationships. The couple later had a son together after getting married. As a teenager, Nicole survived cancer and developed an interest in fitness and bodybuilding. She took part in competitions and aspired to become a coach someday. The police took steps to identify the perpetrator, ruling out robbery as a motive, since nothing was stolen and no attempt was made to remove her clothes. This led detectives to suspect that the attack might be motivated by personal reasons, prompting them to focus their attention on Chris, Nicole's husband. As William once wrote, "Love that transcends this world cannot be separated by it. Death cannot destroy what is immortal." Nicole was an extraordinary woman, a devoted wife, exceptional mother, and a friend to everyone. She was never afraid to express her faith or opinions openly with others. Her ultimate goal was to leave this world a better place than when she entered it. Meanwhile, during interviews with Timber Creek Apartments residents, police identified 2 additional witnesses who reported seeing a man wearing a black hoodie and camouflage pants. This couple claimed to have seen a man matching the suspect's description running across the road without looking around, approximately at the same time Nicole was attacked. The witnesses saw the man, with his hood up, running towards the houses directly across the street from the Timber Creek Apartments. Based on witness descriptions, detectives created a composite sketch of the suspect, which was promptly distributed throughout the city and featured on television news programs. Authorities urged anyone who recognized the individual, even if only slightly, to come forward with information. Detectives collaborated with their informants, seeking any information that could lead them to the murderer's whereabouts. The suspect's sketch generated several promising leads. One such lead came from a man who claimed his son was acquainted with an individual named Taylor. Allegedly, Taylor had been intimidating people with a knife recently. The police located Taylor and brought him in for questioning. During the interrogation, Taylor made some bizarre statements, leading investigators to suspect he might be struggling with mental health issues. When asked about Nicole, Taylor responded unequivocally, stating he was responsible for her death. However, his story was riddled with inconsistencies, parroting details from the news and fabricating unrelated information. Consequently, the police ruled Taylor out as a suspect. After the police released the suspect's sketch to the news, they received a new lead about a man named Nick with a prior criminal record. Although Nick bore some resemblance to the sketch, his criminal history did not involve physical harm to others. The police brought Nick in for questioning, but his behavior raised suspicions. When questioned about Nicole's case, Nick denied any involvement and requested a lawyer. Following this, the police obtained a search warrant for Nick's home, where they found a black hoodie and camouflage pants. However, the hoodie did not match the witness's description, as it featured a prominent white logo on the front. The police sent the clothing to the lab for analysis, but no evidence linking Nick to the crime was found. They also obtained Nick's mobile phone records, which showed he was not near the crime scene at the time of Nicole's attack. As a result, the police cleared Nick as a suspect, and the investigation came to a standstill. Chris Lobby spoke to reporters about the difficult time his family was going through. He couldn't shake off the thoughts of what had happened to Nicole, his mind constantly racing with unanswered questions and different scenarios. "The hardest part is not having answers," he said. The police were concerned the perpetrator might strike again, and sadly, their fears were realized. On September 13, 2014, just 3 weeks after Nicole's death, the Eugene Police Department in Oregon received a disturbing call. Eugene is Oregon's second-largest city, located about 100 miles from Portland. On September 13th, a resident was attacked while leaving a bar near Autzen Stadium after watching a game. That evening, 39-year-old Heather Miller had gone to a nearby bar to watch the game. When the game ended around 8 p.m., she decided to head home. Since the streets were almost empty, she left the bar to call a cab, but discovered her phone was out of battery. Her next move was to walk closer to the stadium in hopes of hailing a taxi. While walking along the sidewalk, she soon noticed that someone was walking behind her. Crossing to the other side of the street and turning around, she saw that the man following her had done the same. She quickened her pace, but soon felt a blow to the back of her head, which knocked her unconscious. When she regained consciousness, she found herself face to face with the criminal, who by this time had pulled off her pants in an effort to fulfill what was most likely the motive for the attack. Heather tried to reason with him. She told him she had a daughter and asked him to please let her see her daughter again, but he kept punching her regardless. Heather said that for every word she uttered, she received a punch in the face. At some point, Heather realized that her only chance to survive was to pretend to be dead. She closed her eyes and didn't move. When the attacker got what he wanted, he immediately ran away. This man severely beat Heather, but she found the strength to stand up and walk out into the middle of the road. A minute later, a car stopped and the driver called 911. Paramedics soon arrived and took her to the hospital. She was conscious and was able to talk to a detective who arrived soon after. At that time, neither she nor the detective knew that the one who attacked her was already at the police station. There's a park near the stadium where the man attacked Heather. A policeman on a bicycle was on duty there that evening. He saw a man running away, stopped him, and noticed that his hands and shoes were bloody. the officer detained him and called a patrol car, which took the detainee to the police station. Despite his age, 17-year-old Jamie Tinoco had repeatedly come to the attention of the police. At the time of his arrest, he was on probation for unlawful possession. Tinoco started using substances at the age of 12, and according to his parents, they could not control him. He dropped out of high school when he was a freshman, and just a day before the attack on Heather Meir, he was arrested for driving without a driver's license but was soon released. During interrogation, Tinoco confessed to attacking Heather. The guy behaved absolutely calmly and indifferently because he had believed he'd done nothing wrong. His behavior gave the Eugene Police Department reason to assume that Heather was not his first victim. The police released his photo, thinking that there might be other women affected by his actions who would come forward. After releasing Tinoco's photo, the Eugene police caught the attention of detectives investigating Nicole Laub's death. They noticed that Tinoco's facial features bore a strong resemblance to those of the suspect in their composite sketch. As they dug deeper, they discovered that Tinoco resided with his parents in Portland, and their apartment was conveniently located directly across the street from Timber Creek. This alarming coincidence further fueled their suspicion that Tinoco might be the perpetrator responsible for Nicole Laub's tragic demise. The detectives questioned Jamie about Nicole Laub's case, hoping he would admit to assaulting her, just as he had confessed to assaulting Heather Miller. However, Tinoco denied any involvement in Nicole's death and refused to answer their questions. Consequently, the police had to search for evidence to connect him to Nicole Laub's murder. Jamie Tinoco had lived with his parents in a residence directly opposite the Timber Creek apartment complex. Following this, the police secured a search warrant for his parents' apartment, whereupon they discovered a black hoodie and camouflage pants in Jamie's room. These items were subsequently sent to a laboratory for analysis. Nevertheless, the laboratory report proved disappointing, as it did not reveal any DNA evidence linking Nicole to any of Jamie Tinoco's possessions, and consequently the investigation stalled. Although there was no conclusive proof that Tinoco was responsible for Nicole's death, there was a significant amount of evidence connecting him to the assault on Heather Miller. During the trial related to the attack on Heather Miller, Tinoco did not dispute his involvement and even seemed to take pride in his actions, presenting himself as a youthful gang member. He was unapologetic, smiling, and conveying a sense of no remorse for what he had done. Tinoco had wandered away from a group of young offenders who were on a supervised trip with the Washington County Juvenile Department. He approached Heather from behind, hit her, knocking her out, and then pulled her into the bushes near Watson Stadium. As a result of the attack, Heather still experiences nightmares and flashbacks. She also suffered physical harm, including a chipped front tooth. Additionally, the attack left her with a broken nose and other injuries that required reconstructive surgery to fix. Since then, Heather has had to cope with the trauma by finding a new job, and even now, she becomes uncomfortable when people approach her from behind or when she walks alone on the street, especially at night. Heather Miller clutched two family members' hands as she sat with more than a dozen supporters before reading her statement aloud in the Lane County Circuit Court. Tinoco appeared to be grinning in court as the victim stood recalling the disturbing details of her attack, how she begged for her life to see her daughter again. When the judge asked Tinoco why he was grinning, he said he didn't know. The judge said the fact that he showed no remorse scared her and called Tinoco a danger to the public, imposing a maximum sentence. The victim, surrounded by her friends and family, walked out of the courtroom. As a brave mother of two, she had told the judge that she prayed Tinoco would never have the chance to harm anyone else in the same way. Refusing to be defined by her ordeal, she was determined to read her statement aloud and make her voice heard, demonstrating remarkable strength and resilience from the very beginning. The judge was not swayed by the defense's portrayal of Tinoco as a teenager whose actions were influenced by years of substance abuse. Instead, the judge formed an opinion about Tinoco's character based on his behavior in the courtroom. Tinoco's lawyer, Chris Schaffner, requested a prison sentence of 8 years and 4 months for his client. However, when the judge gave Tinoco the opportunity to address the court, he failed to apologize, despite his emotional parents sitting just a few rows behind him. Judge Deborah Vogt sentenced Tinoco to 14 years and 2 months in prison, saying his apparent lack of remorse warranted the long sentence and that the community needs to be protected from a dangerous man. She said that by the time Tinoco is eligible to be released, he'll be in his early 30s and will have to register as a sex offender for the rest of his life. Meanwhile, investigators exploited Tinoco's exaggerated self-importance to extract a confession from him. They re-questioned him about Nicole Laub's death, suggesting that he would gain more respect from fellow inmates if they knew he had taken a woman's life. After a brief silence, Tinoco began discussing Nicole, claiming he hadn't intended to harm her. He confessed that he had wanted to stab someone merely to experience the feeling. According to him, his goal wasn't to kill Nicole, but rather to injure her. He recounted that, after crossing the street from his apartment to Timber Creek, he saw Nicole parking a golf cart and carrying a small package containing a balloon to an upstairs apartment. As Nicole ascended the stairs, he hid behind a golf cart, then rushed to the stairs. And when she returned downstairs, he took a deep breath and stabbed her. Tinoco said he chose Nicole because she looked like easy prey. When asked if he had tried to force Nicole into intimacy, as he did with Heather Meller, he replied that he was thinking about doing the same. He was going to do the same. He stated that he didn't do it only because Nicole screamed really loud when he stabbed her, so he ran away. During the reenactment of the crime, Tinoco demonstrated to the investigators how he had escaped from the crime scene. Chris Laub expressed his shock upon learning that the individual responsible for taking his wife's life was only 17 years old. He stated, "As a father of a 13-year-old daughter, it's incomprehensible to think that someone just 4 years older than her could commit such a heinous act." The trial, which started in 2015, took an interesting turn when Tinoco proclaimed his innocence in court, contradicting his earlier confession during the interrogation. His lawyer emphasized that there was no DNA evidence to connect his client to the crime scene. Defense attorney Robert Axford made an emotional plea, saying, "I'm simply asking for mercy for this 17-year-old child who is severely mentally ill and has the potential to change his behavior with proper treatment to rectify the deep-seated issues he's struggling with." The defense called a second psychologist to testify, who had assessed Tinoco and concluded that he showed symptoms of schizophrenia. In contrast, a psychologist from the Oregon State Hospital, who had also examined Tinoco, disagreed, diagnosing a personality disorder rather than schizophrenia. Ultimately, the jury was convinced of Tinoco's guilt after viewing a video recording of his confession and a reenactment of the crime, which was part of the investigative experiment. During the reenactment of the crime, Tinoco revealed specific details that only the perpetrator who attacked Nicole Laub could have known. In the penalty phase, the jury faced two options: sentencing Tinoco to life imprisonment without parole, or to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 30 years. However, the jury decided that there were not enough mitigating circumstances to justify a life sentence with the possibility of parole after 30 years. Consequently, Tinoco was found guilty on all counts in 2017. Tinoco, who was already 20 years old at the time, was standing at the front of a Washington County courtroom between his two attorneys as Circuit Judge Kirsten Thompson asked if he had any words before she officially sentenced him to life in prison without parole. He held his hands down below his waist in front of him, his mouth twitching. "I ask for forgiveness," Tinoco said. He then sat down. Chris Laub, Nicole's husband, said Tinoco's family approached his family after the sentencing. They expressed condolences and apologized. In 2021, the Oregon Court of Appeals overturned the 2017 conviction of Tinoco. Since his trial, juvenile laws have changed significantly. Tinoco was convicted of a Measure 11 crime, but under current juvenile reforms, offenders between 15 and 17 years old are no longer automatically sent to adult court. Instead, prosecutors must request a hearing to decide whether juveniles accused of serious crimes should be tried as adults. If Tinoco is retried and reconvicted, his defense team may seek a lesser sentence. The Laube family, including Nicole's father, Rich Jones, were shocked and saddened by the overturned conviction, knowing they would have to relive the emotional trauma of the trial. Despite the setback, Tinoco remains in prison, and the Nicole Laube case is far from over. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Amanda Anderson. In 2010, 19-year-old Amanda Anderson resided with her family in New Chapel Hill, Texas, a small city with a population of less than 1,000 people, approximately 100 miles from Dallas. The events that unfolded in her life shocked not only her family, but also everyone who became aware of the details of this case. The incident instilled fear in the community, causing residents who previously felt safe enough to leave their front doors unlocked at night to change their habit. Amanda Elizabeth Anderson was born on October 10, 1990, in Fridley, Minnesota, to Mark and Stacy Kennedy Anderson. She graduated with honors from Tyler Gospel Chapel School in 2009. At the time of her death, Amanda was employed by Trinity Mother Francis and was a student at Tyler Junior College, where she was majoring in English literature. With a passion for writing, music, and life, Amanda had a bright future ahead of her. Tragically, her life was cut short on September 15, 2010, leaving her family to face the devastating consequences. Amanda was found dead at the family home in New Chapel Hill. Her 15-year-old brother, Nate Anderson, made a 911 call after returning home and discovering a shock. In his conversation with the dispatcher, Nate explained that he had been doing homework but was getting stressed because he couldn't find the answers to his questions, so he decided to take a quick jog in the nearby woods, a routine he followed occasionally. When he returned, he found the garage door had been kicked open. Nate began by searching his own room, then moved on to Amanda's room. It was only afterwards that he stumbled upon his sister's lifeless body lying on the floor. A horrific discovery. When the dispatcher inquired about the front or back door being kicked in, Nate clarified that it was actually the garage door that had been forced open, likely because it was the most commonly used entrance. Nate was crying, and the dispatcher asked him to calm down, explaining that police and his parents were on their way. The dispatcher then asked if Nate had touched anything in the house, and he said no. About 2 minutes into their conversation, Nate explained to the dispatcher how he'd found Amanda, describing a bullet hole and stating his belief that there were a couple of them in her head. When the investigators arrived at the crime scene, Nate recounted the same details he had provided to the dispatcher during the 911 call. He explained that he had returned home to find his door kicked open, and to his horror, discovered his deceased sister. Overwhelmed with grief, Nate was inconsolable, crying almost continuously as he struggled to come to terms with the shocking fact that someone had shot and killed his sister. During the crime scene examination, the criminologist determined that Amanda was seated on her bed in her bedroom when she was shot, causing her to fall to the floor. The absence of a crime weapon and shell casings at the scene suggests that the perpetrator either removed the casings before fleeing or used a revolver, which would not eject casings. Amanda's parents were devastated when they learned what had happened to their daughter. As deeply religious people, they struggled to comprehend how anyone could commit such an act against someone as innocent and kind-hearted as Amanda, who had only recently graduated from high school and was still figuring out her path in life. She was a gentle soul who wished no harm to anyone and had no enemies. Nate's grandparents recalled that his world was shattered the day Amanda died. He was overcome with grief in the police car, sobbing uncontrollably, and they had to extract him and cradle him in their arms. According to them, Nate had an extraordinary love and devotion for his sister, and discovering her in such a distressed state was utterly unbearable. The investigators canvassed the neighborhood where the crime took place, speaking with residents to gather more information about Amanda and her family. Uniformly, those interviewed described the Andersons as a tight-knit and religious family. One neighbor offered his theory about what might have happened to Amanda. According to him, the area was previously quiet and crime-free, but about 2 weeks prior to Amanda's death, a house in the area was robbed. It's possible that the same person was involved in what happened to Amanda, and that they saw Nate Anderson go out for a run. The perpetrator might have then broken into the Andersons' house, and Amanda might have stumbled upon the scene, becoming a witness. This could be why the robber decided to kill her. To determine if Amanda's death was connected to an attempted robbery, the investigators required evidence. When caught by homeowners, robbers will often take drastic measures to prevent them from notifying the police. However, in this instance, nothing was stolen from the Anderson family home. Despite the opportunity, the perpetrator left Amanda's room untouched, with valuables like jewelry and a laptop remaining in place, unaffected by the intruder. Amanda's father, Mark, conducted a thorough search of the house and reported to the investigators that nothing was missing. Given this, the investigators began to question whether they were dealing with a robbery gone wrong. They found it puzzling that an intruder who broke into the house to steal valuables and encountered Amanda would feel the need to shoot her multiple times. This led them to suspect that the motive behind the crime was not robbery. Amanda's room was not the only area the forensics team scrutinized for clues. They conducted a thorough search of the entire house, gathering fingerprints and hair samples in the hopes of finding traces left by someone who didn't live there. Additionally, they collected Nate's clothing as evidence, given that he was the first to discover Amanda's body. Although an initial inspection of Nate's clothes revealed no signs of blood, consistent with his 911 call assertion that he hadn't touched anything, the police still submitted his garments to the lab for analysis, along with other evidence. This was a standard procedure to rule out family members as potential suspects. The investigators requested that Mark Anderson, Amanda's father, reveal all the weapons present in the house. As was common in Texas, the Anderson family possessed an array of guns. Although they weren't enthusiastic hunters, they occasionally practiced shooting. Following Mark Anderson's directions, the police discovered the weapons and confiscated over 10 distinct types of pistols and rifles, as well as multiple revolvers, from the residence. The police initially considered the possibility of criminal gang activity as a potential motive for the crime, but they quickly ruled it out since they had no suspects and the motive remained unclear. Additionally, their informants did not provide any useful leads. On September 17, 2010, Amanda's family struggled to come to terms with the devastating loss they had suffered. Meanwhile, investigators worked to identify those responsible for the crime. 2 days later, the police received the autopsy results, which revealed that Amanda had been shot 4 times, with all 4 wounds located in the head. What was unusual about the attack was that each shot would have been fatal, yet the perpetrator did not stop after the first shot and instead pulled the trigger 3 more times. The placement of the bullet wounds on Amanda's head was particularly noteworthy. The perpetrator used a small caliber pistol and fired multiple shots. 2 wounds were located on top of her head, another was near the right temple, and the 4th was directly on the forehead. All the wounds, except for the one on the right temple, showed a top-to-bottom trajectory. The exception, the right temple wound, had a bullet that entered at a 90-degree angle. These unusual wound patterns suggested that Amanda's death was more akin to an execution. Amanda's death was caused by .22 caliber bullets. Since there were no gunpowder marks around her head wounds, it's clear the shooter was at least a yard away. Forensic analysis led investigators to believe Amanda was familiar with her killer. They based this conclusion on two key facts. Firstly, Amanda was using her laptop while sitting on her bed when she was shot, implying she felt comfortable and didn't perceive a threat. Secondly, the shooter was standing right next to her. If Amanda didn't know the person, she would have likely reacted to their presence, but instead, she did nothing, suggesting she trusted the perpetrator and didn't anticipate being shot. The investigators looked beyond the Anderson family home for answers to their questions. At Amanda's college, they spoke with her friends, among whom her best friend revealed that Amanda was not the type to interact with strangers, avoided illegal activities, and therefore did not have ties to the criminal underworld. Additionally, she did not have any enemies at college. But what if someone had been secretly watching Amanda and plotting against her? The investigators collaborated with college security to uncover any suspicious incidents involving Amanda or other students over the past year. But this avenue led nowhere. A week after Amanda's death, the police were still without a motive, suspects, or answers for her family. As the family grieved, the locals of New Chapel Hill lived in fear for their lives, desperate to uncover the truth behind the tragedy. Amanda's father, Mark Anderson, expressed his despair, saying he doubted whether there would be a wedding or his wife would get to experience her pregnancy together with their daughter, and all the joys that come with it. Shortly after, a reward was offered to anyone with information that could aid the investigation, in the hope that it would encourage someone who knew something to come forward and share their knowledge with the police. Shortly after, the police station began to receive calls offering tips, but most of these were speculative and ultimately hindered the investigation rather than helping it. The process of verifying all the incoming information was time-consuming, but unfortunately, it failed to yield the desired outcome. Each and every lead ultimately ended in a dead end. The police decided to re-interview the Anderson family, focusing on Amanda's personal life, as the nature and number of wounds suggested a potentially personal motive for the crime. Amanda's mother was at a loss as to who could have committed such a heinous act, describing her daughter as a regular church attendee and an excellent student who always treated others with kindness. According to her mother, Amanda did not have a boyfriend at the time of her death, although she had briefly seen someone around a year prior. However, the relationship had fizzled out, and as far as her mother knew, they had not been in contact since. The police wanted to track down this man to determine the nature of his relationship with Amanda, the reasons behind their breakup, and whether he had any motive to harm her. According to him, he and Amanda shared some classes and occasionally went to the movies with friends, but he claimed they were never in a romantic relationship. They had gone out together on several occasions, but nothing more developed from it. When questioned about the last time he saw Amanda, he stated that he had seen her the day before her death, and she was on her way to pick up Nate from church. This was the extent of what the investigators learned, and it appeared to be another dead end. They decided to go back to the start and re-examine all the evidence, as it all began with Nate's 911 call. They focused on this call once again. In the conversation, Nate claimed he had not entered his sister's room and that someone had shot Amanda. When the dispatcher asked, "Does she have a bullet hole?" Nate responded, "There's not just one. I think there are a couple in her head." When the investigators responded to the crime scene following Nate's call, they were met with a horrific sight. Despite their experience in handling similar cases, even they were initially uncertain that Amanda had been shot multiple times. Furthermore, there was no trace of a crime weapon or shell casings at the scene, which raised a crucial question. How had Nate determined that his sister had been shot multiple times in the first place? The investigators determined that it was impossible for someone standing in the doorway to see that Amanda had been shot in the head, or to know how many times she was shot. After returning to the Anderson house, the officers inspected the door, which Nate claimed was forced open when he got home. Although they found some scratches on the door, the lock was not damaged, leading the police to conclude that someone was trying to make it seem like the door had been kicked open. The crime lab examined all the weapons found at the Anderson house and determined that one of the .22 caliber pistols was likely the one used to shoot Amanda. Although they couldn't eliminate the possibility that this pistol was the murder weapon, the investigators drew a surprising conclusion after reviewing all the available evidence. It appeared that Amanda was killed by someone within her own family. The pistol had been hidden in a secure location, indicating that the killer was familiar with its whereabouts. Furthermore, the killer had returned the weapon to its original hiding place on the night of the crime. Amanda's father was having dinner with a friend, and her mother was at work. At the time, only Amanda and her 15-year-old brother Nate were in the house. Given the circumstances, all the evidence suggested that Nate Anderson was responsible. However, the question remained, what could have driven him to take their father's gun and ultimately to take his sister's life? The investigators took a closer look at what happened that evening. Mark Anderson recalled that he phoned his daughter to remind her to pick up her mother from work. 12 minutes later, Mark received a call from Nate, who was crying and told him that someone had shot him. It transpired that, before calling 911, Nate had initially called his father to inform him and his mother of the devastating news that their son had killed their daughter. The police required concrete evidence before making any charges, as they didn't want to cause Amanda and Nate's parents further distress. The investigators decided to interview Mark Anderson without making any accusations against his son. When asked if Nate had recently used the .22 caliber pistol, Mark replied that just a few days before Amanda's death, he had handed the pistol over to Nate and that Nate had fired it in the backyard. Upon returning to the Anderson house, the officers found several .22 caliber casings in the backyard, which matched the bullets found in Amanda's body. 2 weeks after Amanda's death, a crucial discovery was made that eliminated all doubts. The clothing Nate wore on the day he found his sister's body was submitted to a laboratory for luminol testing. The test results revealed the presence of blood stains on his clothes. A leading national blood spatter expert was called in to assist the investigators in Smith County, and together they concluded that Nate Anderson was either present in the room when the shooting took place, or that he himself fired the fatal shots. The test results revealed that Nate's clothes were stained with his sister's blood. Despite being typical siblings, the police were baffled as to what could have driven Nate to shoot Amanda. The investigation aimed to uncover the reason behind this uncharacteristic act of violence. Family photos of Amanda and Nate Anderson depicted a strong bond of friendship and affection, which their parents corroborated, describing their children as a loving Christian brother and sister who always got along. On November 10, 2010, police obtained an arrest warrant for Nate Anderson, which led them to apprehend him at a church. He was accused of murdering his own sister. The news sent shockwaves through the community, with everyone familiar with the case struggling to comprehend how Nate could commit such a heinous crime. The trial commenced on October 24, 2011, marking the beginning of a long and emotionally charged journey for all involved, especially the Anderson family. Despite the evidence presented against the teenager, his family members remained steadfast in their support, adamant that he was innocent of Amanda's murder. Nate was prosecuted as an adult despite an expert's opinion that it would be in his best interest to remain in the juvenile court system. The judge overruled this opinion. During the trial, the state presented some of the evidence found in the Anderson home after Amanda's death. Prosecutors revealed that Nate's computer had a history of accessing adult websites and contained drawings with violent content. Furthermore, a text message on Amanda's phone mentioned shooting Nathan. When her friend asked why, Amanda responded that it was because Nathan would shoot large staples at her head and never assisted with household chores. An expert testified that a discovery about Nate helped establish a possible motive for the crime. However, Nate's lawyer argued that the evidence presented was not unusual. Ultimately, in February 2012, Nate Anderson accepted a plea deal and pleaded guilty to a first-degree crime. Prior to his plea, Nate confessed to a psychologist and his parents that he was responsible for Amanda's death. He revealed that he shot her with a pistol from their home. In a joint statement, Mark and Stacy Anderson, Nate and Amanda's parents, expressed their emotional response to the confession. Mark said, "Nate asked for my forgiveness, and I forgave him." Stacy added, "As a mother who loves both her children, this has been the most difficult experience of my life." The court has sentenced Nate Anderson to a 20-year prison term with the possibility of parole after 10 years. According to Nate's attorney, accepting the plea agreement was in his best interest. The attorney stressed that neither Nate nor his family ever wanted the case to go to trial. When asked about the motive behind the crime, Nate's attorney refused to elaborate, saying only that Nate had shown remorse and had received forgiveness. The attorney, Brett Harrison, added that there had been many difficult conversations and tears. He stated that the incident was clearly a hate crime, as there was no evidence of any other trauma. The Smith County Sheriff's Office stated that Nate was eligible to apply for parole 2 years ago, but unfortunately, they were unable to find any information regarding whether he did so. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Rebecca Payne. In Massachusetts on May 20th, 2008, at 6:30 a.m., the Boston police received a panicked call from the manager of the Parker Hill Apartments complex. The manager was extremely distraught, reporting that he had found a door ajar on the 3rd floor, belonging to 22-year-old student Rebecca Payne. When he knocked on the door and called out her name, he received no response. This prompted him to enter the apartment, where he was met with a disturbing sight: dark red spots and streaks on the floor, leading him to one of the rooms. Inside, he found Rebecca's lifeless body, with her belongings scattered everywhere. The state of the room strongly suggested that her killer had been searching for something in her apartment. Rebecca Charlotte Payne was born on April 19, 1986, in New Milford, Connecticut, to Virginia and Nicholas Payne. She attended New Milford High School, where she excelled in sports, particularly field hockey, track, and tennis, before graduating in 2004. Rebecca then pursued a 5-year program in athletic training at Northeastern University in Boston, focusing on the care and prevention of athletic injuries. During her 4th year, she served on the Dean's Council and as president of the Athletic Training Club, playing a key role in organizing the university's Vision for the Future Athletic Training Leadership Forum. Additionally, she was involved with the Episcopal Lutheran Center. Known for her ability to connect with people from all walks of life, Rebecca had a large circle of friends and was always willing to lend a helping hand to those in need. When Rebecca was found dead in May 2008, her friends were shocked and couldn't comprehend who could have committed such a heinous act. The police investigation began when they arrived at the crime scene, and they quickly noticed that the front door showed no signs of forced entry. This led them to suspect that Rebecca might have known her killer, possibly even letting them into her apartment voluntarily. The apartment, situated on the 3rd floor, consisted of 2 bedrooms. In one of the bedrooms, Rebecca's lifeless body was found lying face down on the floor. The trail of blood from the living room to the bedroom where Rebecca lay suggested that the attack had begun in the living room. Further evidence, including casings found at the scene, supported this theory. Forensic examination revealed that Rebecca had been shot 5 times. The bloodstains in the apartment indicated that, although severely injured, Rebecca was conscious for a while and managed to crawl to the bedroom. However, she ultimately succumbed to her injuries there, exhausted and drained of her strength. The detectives sought to identify who could have perpetrated such cruelty against her. the police quickly dismissed the possibility that the incident was a botched theft, given that her valuables remained untouched. Although the apartment was in disarray, detectives believed the perpetrator intentionally created the mess to mislead them. However, it was also plausible that the disarray resulted from Rebecca's attempts to resist and fight for her life. When the investigators examined the apartment, they found that the balcony door was open, just like the front door. The second bedroom showed signs that someone had been living there too. The identity of this person needed to be determined, as they could be the one who took Rebecca's life. Alternatively, if they weren't involved, they had to be ruled out as a suspect. After speaking with the manager, the detectives discovered that Rebecca didn't live alone. She shared an apartment with a fellow student. The police immediately began searching for this roommate. Meanwhile, they interviewed all residents of Parker Hill Apartments. The brutal murder of Rebecca, who had been shot 5 times, would have certainly generated significant noise. It was astonishing to the officers that multiple residents of the apartment complex reported hearing a woman's screams and gunfire between 3 and 4 a.m. Yet sadly, no one took the initiative to contact the police. It seemed that each individual assumed someone else would take responsibility and make the call. In psychology, the phenomenon where individuals are less likely to assist someone in distress when others are present is known as the bystander effect, or Genovese syndrome. This social psychological theory suggests that the presence of other people can inhibit an individual's willingness to help a victim. The term Genovese syndrome originates from a tragic incident that occurred on March 13, 1964, when 28-year-old Kitty Genovese was brutally murdered outside her apartment building in Kew Gardens, Queens, New York City. Although it was initially reported that 38 witnesses witnessed or heard the attack without calling the police or providing assistance, this portrayal has since been disputed as inaccurate. The case of Rebecca Payne led to an investigation into the social psychological phenomenon known as the bystander effect, or Genovese syndrome. What's truly shocking is that, unlike in the widely reported Kitty Genovese incident, Rebecca's neighbors actually did hear her screams and the sound of gunshots, yet still failed to call 911. This tragic event was a devastating loss for Rebecca's parents. They described their daughter as a driven and compassionate young woman who was loved by her friends. Rebecca was the kind of person who always put others first, giving selflessly from the heart. During the investigation, police interviewed a resident who lived on the first floor of the apartment complex where the crime took place. He reported seeing a black SUV approach the building at night, but due to the darkness, he was unable to make out the license plate or identify anyone getting out of the vehicle. The apartment building was equipped with surveillance cameras both inside and outside, which investigators hoped would provide crucial evidence. However, it emerged that the CCTV footage could only be viewed in real time, and recording it required inserting a video cassette into a VCR and pressing the record button, a step that unfortunately wasn't taken. Considering this information and the fact that the residential complex's manager discovered Rebecca's body, investigators began to suspect him of committing the crime. As a resident of the building, he had unrestricted access to Rebecca's apartment at all times. Furthermore, he was aware that no one monitored the surveillance cameras, which might have led him to wait until late at night to attack Rebecca for unknown reasons. The police sought to explore all possible scenarios. The police investigation into the manager gathered pace when they conducted a background check on him, which revealed a history of legal issues related to illegal substances. Furthermore, a thorough search of his apartment by the police turned up additional evidence. An officer noticed several dark red stains on the front door. The stains were swabbed by forensic experts and sent for further analysis. The apartment complex manager was taken in for police questioning. Investigators grilled him with questions, trying to determine if he was concealing information or would alter his story. However, he denied any involvement in Rebecca Payne's death. stating that he was in his apartment the entire night with his wife. The investigators then spoke with his wife, who corroborated her husband's alibi, confirming that he had indeed spent the entire night with her. The police released the suspect after a laboratory report confirmed the dark red stains on his apartment door were just paint, eliminating grounds for his arrest. During their investigation, detectives reviewed video and photo evidence from the scene, which led them to focus on a public transportation card. This card, used in the Boston area, stores data on each use, including the exact location and time. The transit police provided detectives with CCTV footage, which showed Rebecca using the card on her way home, appearing calm and alone, with no one following her. Unfortunately, this footage did not help identify any potential suspects. A few days later, investigators obtained another surveillance video from a camera outside the hospital building near the Parker Hill Apartments. The recording showed a black SUV passing by around the same time as the attack on Rebecca. The vehicle matched the witness's description, but the poor quality of the footage made it impossible to read the license plates. However, investigators were able to conclude that the car was a Ford. After identifying Rebecca's roommate, the detectives brought her in for questioning to determine if she had any connection to the incident. They wanted to know if she had any information about the events surrounding Rebecca's death. The roommate claimed to be shocked by the news and explained that she had moved back in with her parents to study for an exam. When her parents corroborated her alibi, she was cleared as a suspect. Although the conversation didn't reveal any direct evidence, the roommate did provide a useful lead. She mentioned that Rebecca's boyfriend, Matt, also a fellow student, had access to their apartment. Matt's motive for taking Rebecca's life was a crucial question investigators had to answer. They reached out to Matt by phone and learned he had moved to New York State to live with his parents around the time Rebecca was attacked. Matt claimed to be depressed over his girlfriend's death, but his distress might have been an act. Matt said he was staying with his parents, and they corroborated his alibi when shown a printout of his cell phone's call history. Investigators discovered Matt had spoken to Rebecca around midnight, mere hours before her death. However, the cell tower that received the signal from Matt's phone was located near his parents' house in New York State. Through an experiment, investigators determined that Matt wouldn't have had enough time to drive from his parents' house to Boston in 3 or 4 hours to commit the crime. As a result, Matt was also cleared from the list of suspects. Family and friends were gathered at Rebecca's home in Connecticut, bidding her a final farewell. But the police investigation had stalled due to a lack of evidence, new witnesses, and DNA samples. The case had reached a dead end. Nicholas Payne expressed the sentiments of those who loved her. "We're left to mourn the loss of Rebecca, knowing we'll never again hear her laughter or share in her life's adventures and progress. All of that has been taken from us." As the years went by, Rebecca's parents continued to wait in vain for answers about their daughter's death, which remained a mystery. However, a surprising breakthrough occurred in 2012. Anthony White, a man, was arrested by the Boston police for dealing illegal substances. With the threat of a lengthy prison sentence looming, White proposed a deal to the investigators. In exchange for a shorter sentence, he would provide information about the night Rebecca Payne died. Recognizing this as a potential opportunity to finally crack the long-dormant case, the investigators accepted White's offer. After consulting with the prosecutor, White reported that on May 20th, 2008, he received a contact from an acquaintance, Cornell Smith, who was also involved in illegal drug dealing. Smith requested a meeting with White and arrived accompanied by their mutual friend, Michael Balba, who drove a black SUV. The three of them proceeded to the Parker Hill Apartments, where Balba parked his vehicle to observe the activities taking place inside. According to White, Cornell Smith spotted Rebecca in a third-floor window and exclaimed, "That's her." They waited until the lights in Rebecca's apartment went dark, Then Smith climbed from the first-floor balcony to the second and finally the third floor. Since the balcony door was open, he entered the apartment. However, Rebecca wasn't asleep. Instead, she was lying on the living room couch. When she saw the intruder, she began screaming, and a brief struggle followed. Smith then fired 5 shots at her and exited through the front door, after which they drove away. The investigators were skeptical of White's testimony, believing he had made up the story to get a shorter prison sentence. They couldn't figure out why Cornell Smith would want to kill Rebecca, who was not involved in his world in any way. What White said next shocked and disturbed the officers greatly. According to him, Rebecca's death was a tragic case of mistaken identity. 2 sisters, who closely resembled each other, lived on the first floor of the Parker Hill apartments, and one of them bore a striking similarity to Rebecca. These sisters were not only rivals of Smith's, but also involved in the illegal drug trade. Smith believed he had been wrongly arrested due to their illicit activities and sought revenge. Although he knew they resided in the Parker Hill apartments, he was unaware of their specific floor or apartment number. When he spotted Rebecca in the window, he mistakenly identified her as one of the sisters he sought to harm. Investigators determined that Cornell Smith had been arrested in February 2008 for illegally selling drugs, but he was freed on bail just before Rebecca's death occurred. He subsequently sought revenge against the sisters, whom he mistakenly blamed for his arrest. By 2012, Anthony White had shared his information with investigators, but Cornell Smith was already serving a 12-year sentence for selling illegal drugs, a conviction he received 2 years prior. Following White's testimony, Smith was subsequently charged with Rebecca's murder, despite his denial of any involvement. However, before Smith's court appearance, the prosecution team received a severe blow. Their key witness, Anthony White, had died in prison. This was a significant setback because, aside from White's testimony, there was no physical evidence directly linking Smith to Rebecca Payne's apartment. Hoping to finally bring Cornell Smith to justice, investigators pored over his court file on drug trafficking and were shocked to discover incriminating letters he had written to the presiding judge. In these letters, Cornell Smith came across as arrogant, looking down on others. Although some of the letters made no sense, one of them contained a crucial piece of evidence that would ultimately be his downfall. It's noteworthy that it's unclear why these letters went unnoticed earlier, especially since they were addressed to the judge. In one of the letters, Smith wrote in anger about an earlier altercation that had taken place downtown Boston. This letter described an event that ultimately led to the unfortunate death of Rebecca Payne at the hands of Cornell Allen Smith Sr. Notably, the letter confirmed that Smith was in her apartment at the time of her death. The trial of Cornell Smith took place in 2015. Throughout the proceedings, from the start of the trial to the sentencing, the district attorney maintained that Rebecca Payne was an innocent victim who had no involvement with Smith or Balba. Over the course of the trial, Smith went through 3 lawyers. His first lawyer, Jeffrey Karp, a seasoned defense attorney with over 20 years of experience, withdrew from the case after Smith assaulted him during a preliminary hearing at the Suffolk County Superior Court in Massachusetts. In a shocking and unprovoked attack, Smith suddenly stood up and struck Karp on the head with his handcuffed hand. According to Nicholas Payne, this incident demonstrated the kind of person Smith is. Notwithstanding the assault, Karp declined to press charges against Smith, leaving it to the judge to appoint a new attorney to represent him. Cornell Smith pleaded guilty to the involuntary deprivation of Rebecca Payne's life and was sentenced to serve between 18 and 20 years in prison. Before passing sentence, the judge instructed Smith to turn and face Rebecca's friends and family, telling him that they represented the pain caused by his actions. In memory of Rebecca, her hometown has named its local tennis courts, a garden, and a National Athletic Trainers Association scholarship fund after her. Her father, Nicholas Payne, said they wanted to ensure she would not be forgotten.